Good day and good evening, and welcome to Dailies Hangout stream. With me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. As we usually do on these streams, we go through the duty roulette, do the ones we like. We usually do some weekly stuff like P12N and Thalea at the end, but given that neither of those have a weekly lockout anymore, I'm not sure if we will just what we'll do when we run out of roulettes to do. But we'll do the things that we normally do at the very least of the dailies. Let's see, Derby says, are we going to OCE again this time? Today we're playing on Chaos. I can't really, I don't think I can play Sage very well on 300 MS. So, but we will be on OCE for Small Kai on Saturday as usual, I guess. Now, we'll also be on OCE for tea time. But yeah, today we are on Chaos. With that said, a Chester, a Catch, a Zarf, a Ogni, a Kirahine, a Vince, a Aradel, a Kuma, a Derpy, a Gazel, a Cat Damon, a Lexi, a Lemon, a Matthew, a Gleaming, and a Philip, and a Zip. Hope you're all doing very well. Yeah, I'm sorry, Gleaming. It's the thing is, as I said, I would like to play with everyone. It's just that I would also like to be able to play the game decently well. If it wasn't that, if it wasn't about latency, then I would probably just exclusively play on OCE. It's Kai's worst job, right? It would be one of my worst jobs if I played on OCE. Exactly, Matthew, because Eucrasia is interesting on high MS. That was actually, when I visited OCE, that was the first thing I checked, was how does Eucrasia feel? And let's just say that you cannot, on 300 MS, it is not possible to consistently use Eucrasia without clipping the GCD. It's not possible. On average, it should add 0.1 second to every time you use Eucrasia, you will clip by 0.1 second. Imagine trying to play Gunbreaker at 300 MS. Gunbreaker can at least single weave, so it might work. It'll be hard. Because you might have a hard time actually weaving everything, but I think you can do most of the things you want. Most of the things you want. Mainly because you need during your No Mercy window you have, if you can only single weave, then you have 8 OGCD spaces during No Mercy. And let's see here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then you have if you're doing the big 2-minute burst, it's 8, 9, 10, 11, and that starts to become a problem, right? Lexi says, I tried some Savage with Sage and OCE, quickly switched to Scholar or White Mage. Understandable. Let's see, Kuma says, I might send you a recording of a run because someone was so mean to me yesterday. Still learning Sage. I also don't think they understand I have to attack to heal. Well, you don't have to attack to heal, but if the thing they were being mean to you about was that they said that you shouldn't attack, then they're in the wrong. Yeah, and I don't even need to see what happened to know that they're in the wrong if they were like, oh, why are you attacking? You're a healer. Yeah, in that case, Kuma, then it's them. Like, the thing is, Kuma, it's not even about you being a sage. It's not even about you being a sage. Healers in Final Fantasy XIV are supposed to attack. Like, Sage has, you know, quote-unquote, an excuse to attack even more because they heal as a result of attacking. But all healers should be attacking primarily, actually. Like, all those, like, whenever you need to heal, that of course takes precedence over attacking, but only if you have to. Hey Siren, hope you're doing well. Lemon says, what jobs are good for high ping? I would say Paladin and Warrior are doable. Paladin has, let's see, Paladin has, you know, 8 GCDs of space in their burst. If you can only single weave, then it becomes, you know, you use Fight or Flight leading into your burst, then you weave Requiescat, then you weave Expiation, then you weave Circle of Scorn, then you weave Intervene, then you weave Intervene. And that's not that much, so you can easily make your way through those weaves even on a high ping. Warrior is a bit the same. They have not that many weaves, and if you're not like in a raid group trying to optimize your burst or something, then most of your OGCDs can be used whenever you want. Because inner release boosts specific attacks, so you can just, you know, use your cooldown to come up, which means that you have the space to just go, well, I could weave something now. So you can just, you know, you can weave Upheaval when it becomes available, which gives you space to weave, you know, Infuriate and Onslaught whenever. Yazel says Dark Knight. If you're not stockpiling resources, if you're not stockpiling resources, then that removes a lot of the weaves, and technically, if you're not optimizing around a burst window again, then, well, Dark Knight has a permanent damage buff as opposed to the other tanks that have like a burst, so to speak. So if you're not planning around the rest of the group's bursts, then you can just, you know, use your GCDs when they come up. You just you open with single weaving something every GCD, and when you run out of things to weave, you just click things on cooldown. And that's pretty manageable. It's mainly Gunbreaker that really has trouble among the tanks, just because it has both the concentrated burst window and too many weaves to fit it all. For healers, all healers will have some amount of trouble. Sage and Astrologian, however, are completely off limits. You can't use Eucrasia on a high latency at all without it being problematic. And Astrologian cards, I don't think it's happening. It's going to take you 40 years to actually do that card burst in the opener. With single weaves. But White Mage might be fine. Scholar might be fine. Especially in lower level content where, like, for example, level 50 content, Scholar is great because you can just use Art of War. And then you're like a melee DPS, you can single weave. Oh yeah, Lexi, what I meant was more like, indeed, Warrior has a permanent damage buff just like Dark Knight has. That is true. In terms of mages, I would say Black Mage is the best one, like the most effective of the three, but all three of them will run into issues on high latency. I don't think you can get super smart with transpose lines on Black Mage with a high ping, but it's mainly because both Summoner and Red Mage have some very strict weaves at certain points that can get really awkward. Like, if you have high enough ping, you can actually cast Jolt, and then you click the Thunder, and you haven't received dual cast yet, I've been told. And that makes Red Mage completely unplayable. For ranged physical, I would say Dancer, weirdly, is your best option. It's not perfect, but it would be your best option, mainly because both Bard and Machinist have a lot more weaves. If you just make sure to not stockpile feathers too hard on Dancer, it should be possible. Some of them might work as well. The particular ones I know is that if your latency is at a certain point, then you need a huge amount of spell speed to actually get 6 casts during Bahamut and Phoenix. So it can get really janky. For melee DPS, you're in an awkward spot. I think Samurai is your best option. Both Reaper, Ninja, and Monk have different reasons why you don't want to play them. With Reaper being similar to Machinist in that, while yes, you don't have to like weave very much, the specific time where you have to weave, you can't single weave on high latency, and you can't save it for later, unlike Machinist. But if you don't mind that, then Reaper is somewhat okay. I don't know about Dragoon. The thing is, Dragoon has so many OGCDs that you want to use in a certain way that you probably really want to double weave. So if you can't, it's going to be terrible. Which is why I think your best option for melee is Samurai. Kaito says, I have high ping. When I play Ninja, sometimes both Shuriken and Raiton come out at the same time. Ugh. Well, Kuma, Sage is complicated. Soteria is a good option. I'm pretty sure I go over ways to like play Sage at level 70, how to use your cooldowns in an effective way at level 70 in my starter guide for Sage, and also build on that in the higher level guide. And one of the big weaknesses of Sage, in specifically around the level 70 range, is that it feels like you're missing something. Like as if from level 1 to 1 to 45, Sage is insane, just like the Cardia healing is ridiculous, and when you get Eucrasia, well, that's pretty neat too, but just the Cardia healing is excellent. And of course that's in low-level content, right, when you get synced down. Then from level 45, Ryokoli just carries you, and then at some point, it feels like you should have gotten something and just haven't. And that thing that it feels like you're missing is almost certainly enhanced Kerakoli, because that just turbocharges Kerakoli from being an okay defensive cooldown option, like you have that, to being like, oh yeah, it also heals, so it's better than most of your other buttons. Like just on its own, it's better than most of your other buttons. So, like, once you get to that level range, it'll start to feel easier. But it is difficult, because it's very easy for me to say that. That like, it's easy for me to play Sage at level 70 because I've dealt with it enough that I just go, oh, I know what to use instead, and things like that. But you have to learn that first. Isn't that all healers in that range? Maybe except Astrologian? Yeah, I suppose. To me, personally, I feel like Excogitation, for some reason, combined with Ether Pact, kind of tides you over in the range where you don't have Enhanced Sacred Soil. And I don't know what to tell you with White Mage. I don't play White Mage enough in that level range to give you like a straight answer on how that feels. Like, to me, White Mage feels a little bit awkward to play at most levels. Like, on AoE fights mainly, because of Holy. Also, hey Chelsea, Anemia, and Rust. Hope you're all doing very well. And good luck, Chester. Chelsea says, Cardia is more or less fluff in normal content if you've got the job down at higher levels. Yeah, kind of. It is interesting when you have a really strong group, or like a pretty strong group, where like if there's like one outlier player, then as a Sage being comfortable with moving Cardia around is incredibly effective. Because, like, just because, like, normally you keep Cardia on the tank, but if the tank has full HP anyway and someone else could use some healing, well, you can save some Adderskull by moving it around. Why is Holy set up the way it is? I don't know. I don't know. The interesting thing with that XVR is that White Mage has always had Holy, and Holy has essentially always been the way that it is. Scholar used to have a spell called Miasma 2, which was like an AoE around them, which did garbage damage, but applied a dot to everyone nearby. Not like an amazing dot, but you know, on multiple enemies it became kinda good. But aside from that, Scholars then had Bane, which allowed them to spread their other dots to all the enemies. So White Mages were supposed to, like, you know, do Holy Spam, supposedly, or hypothetically, while Scholars, you know, set up dots on one enemy, did the Miasma 2 on everything, and then just Bane. And that should be enough. Like, they could also put down a Shadow Flare AoE on the floor, but they were the dot one, right? And White Mage was the explodey one. Then Astrologian came along, and they were just given Gravity, which was like, it had the best of both worlds, because it was ranged, that's sometimes good. It didn't have a 2.5 second cast time, it had a 1.5 second cast time, and it did upfront damage. So, like, if Astrologian had, like, the weakness it had was it had a little bit less control over where the AoE landed, because it was, like, centered on something. Then they decided that Scholar doesn't have Bane anymore. And they only have one dot. So it started to be a little bit weird if they, like, had Miasma 2, which kind of sucked on its own. So they just took that, threw it out, everyone looked at each other like, so Summoner gets Miasma 1 and 3, no one gets Miasma 2, is that right? Yeah, you'll get it when we get to Glare in a few years. Ah, of course. And then they just gave Scholar Art of War, which is like, aside from the stun, which is sometimes not even appreciated, Art of War is just, imagine Holy, but better, in every way. No, Gazel, that's what I said. That Summoner had Miasma 1 and 3, but then they removed Miasma 2, and gave Scholar Art of War, when they removed Bane from Scholar. Are we getting Holy 2 in Dawntrail? Why would you want that? You already have Holy 3. Why would you want that? Matthew says, I feel like Scholar needs some kind of rework. Unfortunately, the obvious keep it similar but less janky is already on the in the game as Sage. That is an interesting... Wouldn't it be... I'm just saying for a second here, for the Scholar mains in the crowd, would you not be quite furious if you had Scholar for years, then they add Sage, which is basically more convenient Scholar, like Scholar with less jank. And then they rework Scholar because Sage is the less janky Scholar. Like, they add Scholar, make a quote-unquote better Scholar, and then they take the actual Scholar and rework it. Wouldn't that be weird? Yeah, exactly, Lexi. That's also my experience with Sage, is that in most casual difficulty content, Sage feels like the ultimate multi-tool, because you have everything. Like, sure, you don't have exactly the same insane amount of healing potential that an Astrologian or White Mage might have, but you don't need more than what you have, and you have all the cool, like, all the defensive options that a Scholar has. Almost more, in certain ways. Again, exactly in the amount you need for casual content, which makes Sage feel insanely overpowered. Is Dyscrasia better or worse? Like, compared to Holy? Oh, versus Out of War. That, I think that varies a bit. I think? At level 50. At level 50, Art of War is 150 potency, and Dyscrasia is 160, so technically Dyscrasia is better, but ironically, you don't use Dyscrasia on a single target as a Sage at level 50, because Doses, you can't see the correct potency here, but at level 50, Doses is 180 potency. So Doses is just barely better. That's the reason why Sage doesn't do AoE on single target, because they actually have an even better single target option. At max level, Dyscrasia is 170, but Art of War is 180. At level 50 specifically, it's more complicated. It's slightly more complicated because, of course, Scholar also gets better like book smacks and that. Zav says, I'm just confused by how Scholar is supposedly janky. Oh, let me explain to you all how Scholar supposedly can be janky. As a pet job, you can do this. Ah, I didn't get Whispering Dawn. That's a shame. Ah, darn it. Ah, it's called ghosting. I set up the situation so that it would happen, yes, but it can happen under normal circumstances. The thing that makes Scholar janky is its pet aspects, which are mostly fine. The reaction speed of the pet means that ghosting is rare. And then there's the part where Scholar has to sometimes send away its pet, and a lot of its buttons rely on the pet being there. And Sage does not have that problem. Does that make, say, Scholar bad? No. Is being janky supposed to mean that it is bad? No. It's just that Sage feels a little easier to manage once you've learned it, I feel a lot of people feel like. And then there's also the thing Traverse mentioned, that the existence of energy drain also makes Scholar kind of weird. Oh, you got it, Emir. Yeah, I don't actually, I'm not sure where the event started, but someone else, but Girin said Uldar. Do you want to make it so you can't summon Seraph for GCD after you use the fairy action? No. You know what they could do to fix the ghosting problem? You click Whispering Dawn. Option 1 of 2. That fixes it. Cooldown starts when the pet actually successfully uses it. Option 2. The cooldown is refunded if the pet fails to use it within a certain amount of seconds. Now that problem is gone. Yeah, either one works for me. The reason why it makes more sense to refund the cooldown is because if it doesn't go on cooldown, then it feels like you're not sure if you used it, right? But yeah, you can, if you're an experienced Scholar player, you can play around this. Like, for example, Gazel suggested, do you want it so that you can't use Summon Seraph for GCD after use the fairy action? The reason why you would do that is because with the reaction speed of pets nowadays, if you just give them one GCD of time and just leave them to do it instead of like ordering them around, which actually delays the use of Whispering Dawn if you have ordered it, they'll get to it rather quickly. Like they will get to it rather quickly. So you just have to play around that. It's the same thing with Summoner. If you're going to use Radiant Aegis, make sure you're using it, 1, when you have your pet, obviously, and 2, when there's at least 1 more GZD until you're going to do something else. What if Whispering Dawn becomes an action casted by the Scholar? I don't think you want that, Philippe. Because then the question becomes, so why don't we make Fey Illumination like a thing cast by the Scholar? You know what, while we're on it, why don't we just make Fey Blessing a thing cast by the Scholar? Can't we just have Ether Pact be like a beam from the Scholar to the target? Actually, the only thing the pet is doing is cast Embrace and turn into Seraph. Why don't we just make it so that Summon Seraph is a mode you switch into where you just grow wings like White Mage does? Which White Mage also gets at level 80. And then during that time you can like use Consolation. And now you might be thinking, but if that's the case, who's casting Embrace? Just make it like a passive toggle on the Scholar. You just toggle it and then you just like radiate healing to random people. And then you might be thinking, so why is the pet there? Correct. And now you know what happened to the Summoner pet. I kid you not, Philippe. I kid you not. Summoner, their pet basically lost all agency and things it was supposed to be doing when it got reworked. The only things the pet kept agency over was Radiant Aegis, which was a new action that was added, and Searing Light was cast by you ordering the pet to do it. If you've ever seen the alternative artwork where... let me see if I can find it. Here it is. That's how Searing Light worked on release. Order your pet to execute Searing Light. And it looked like this. It took like 1 major patch and then they reworked it to be, you know what, never mind. The Summoner does it. It's easier that way. Because incidentally, you wanted to use Searing Light Bahamut. Like Searing Light, immediately Bahamut. And that meant that it was pretty common that it ghosted. If you happened to be moving, then your carbuncle would be like, oh, right, Searing, and then just disappear into a smoke. And then you just didn't get your raid buff. So they just put it on the player. So you take that with every single... You can make this logical conclusion with every single pet action on Scholar, and you'll come to have the Summoner pet, that it casts Radiant Aegis. Each time you attack, your fairy casts Embrace. Oh boy. Yeah, the thing is, and we'll get to the duties in just a moment. Just finishing on this. The thing is that Scholar doesn't need to have all of those actions connected to its pet. But like that's the same as with so many other things, like why do we need to have continuation? Can't we just add that potency to the Gnashing Fang combo steps? Why do we need to go through this song and dance of doing hand signs? Can't we just press a Suiton button and then it just goes blam? Like, sometimes it's just a flavor thing, right? And just so happens that the flavor of Scholar is you have a pet and that pet comes with some jank. But that makes sense. If you had a dog as your healer, then surely that one wouldn't go exactly right every time. Just make sure to give it a treato whenever it does good. Now, expert roulette. If you want to join me for expert roulette, come on over to me. Also, by the way, hey Bob, hope you're doing well. And Punk Fiddler and a Moose and Obama. I would get so mad with my dog if my dog was a healer. I think we have enough people to make multiple groups. Too busy knocking everything over. Make it a cat. Oh boy. Do we? It looks. Are you making a group too? Because then maybe there's anyone that wants to join the group too. That is actually a very good point, Gaslan. That is actually something that I sometimes bring up. Like whenever we talk about what would you like changed about any of the jobs we know are getting reworked, I usually go something like, I don't play the job, so I think I'll choose whatever the people that main the job want. Because the thing is, the people that main the job will miss it way more than you. Because they don't have a different one to play. Like, that is their main and that's it. You have a different job to main, perhaps. And if the job you don't like anyway sucks more after the changes, you'll just play a different job. You didn't care in the first place, right? Imagine for a second a cat playing Black Mage. Have you... I've seen this picture of a cat standing in ley lines. I thought that was a real picture. What? I thought... was that photoshopped? Oh, man. I've been had. Wait a minute. Ha! Oh, nope. Apparently it did work. For a second I thought I was standing perfectly between the two mobs and didn't hit anything. Hey, Vyak. Hope you're doing well. Also, hey, Lemon. Hope you're doing well as well. Oh, right, the 2-minute burst. And yeah, exactly, Chelsea. That was kind of what I was getting at, is that there are people that like Scholar as it is very much. And the job plays just fine. And I think most of the players that want major changes to Scholar are not maining the job. And I'm sure there are some that are like, I don't like this aspect, but otherwise I like the job. And you could have said the same thing about Summoner, wherein, well, there were people that liked it as is. But I think the reason why they decided to rework the job was both because it had reached such a level of, like, jank, quote-unquote, and too many things in the oven at once that it felt like they had trouble going anywhere with it. Like, if those that played Summoner before the rework, so like in Shadowbringers, what would you have given old Summoner in Endwalker? And I mained Summoner, and my perspective on Summoner back then, when I was told it's getting a rework, I said I hope they decide to focus on something. And that was genuinely what I said I wanted for it. I hope they choose to focus on something, because they're not focusing on anything right now. And they actually did do exactly that. Now we can discuss on whether they focused the right thing, but but I actually got what I wished for Summoner. It's just that it was a little bit of a monkey paw wish. I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit rude. But given that I played Shadowbringers Summoner, I don't feel like you had that much more agency and choice compared to, like, new Summoner. It's just that it was packaged as if you had more choice and things to think about. You still had to use Tritus Ass at a very specific time to maintain your dots on time. You had to use Phoenix at a very specific time to use that on time, and use Bahamut at a very specific time to get that on use, and you had to reapply your dots manually at one specific time to make that work on time. Like, it was a relatively set-in-stone rotation. It's just that new Summoner makes it a lot simpler, which makes it feel dumber, I guess. Like, yes, there was more you could choose to do on Shadowbringers Summoner, but if we're thinking like the levels of optimization we do today, it would still be just, well, you do the thing that's optimal, obviously. You know, Punk Fiddler, I get what where you're coming from with that. The thing is, one of the things that makes it the saddest that they went away from, like, the pet focus on Summoner is that Endwalker came with a massive improvement to pet responsiveness. Like, in Shadowbringers, ghosting was way more common because it was relatively common that it took over a second for your pet to actually do something when you asked for it. Like, over a second more than it does now. And then they both fixed that, quote-unquote, fixed it by making the pet more responsive. And then they, like, removed nearly all of the pet interactions for Summoner, making it redundant. And you see, I also understand your perspective, Catch, that not every job has to be super complicated. I think the problem there is that a lot of summoner mains from Shadowbringers liked the complexity of the job, and that's fine. Similarly, there's nothing wrong with liking New Summoner, which is why I feel that it's mean to call New Summoner for brain dead people, because it's not. That is absolutely not what it is. A huge benefit of New Summoner being as simple as it is that it allows you to have more breathing room to focus on the boss fight instead of looking at your bars, which I've also appreciated when learning a fight. The reason why there is a problem with a New Summoner replacing Old Summoner is, of course, that the players that liked Old Summoner, some among them liked Old Summoner because of its complexity. So it's like replacing, like the group that, like that's exactly the problem with New Summoner, is that it didn't exactly fulfill the thing that I talked about before, right? That whatever the, like, if there's a rework coming, make it so that whatever the people that main it want happen, so that everyone's happy. You know, Lexi, you didn't have to use Super Bolide immediately. If I were in your shoes and I had planned to use Super Bolide, I would have just used no cooldowns and waited until I was near dead and then used Super Bolide. By using Super Bolide from full HP, you immediately took 123,000 damage, which wasn't necessary. Like, I don't even know if you would have taken 123,000 damage in those 10 seconds. Like, I saw your warning that you're going to do it, so I wasn't planning to use any cooldowns until you used yours. But, you know, consider it for next time. I'm not tank shaming. I'm giving advice, Bronto. Gleaming says that makes sense if they rework Dark Knight. I think I'd probably be unhappy with it. Oh, do I have a story for you? Do you know which job got reworked with Shadowbringers? You want to take a guess? A lot of people didn't like the rework. And that's actually the weird thing, is that a lot of the jobs that are getting like a rework now are jobs that have had like, oh yeah, Machinist also got a rework with Shadowbringers. That is actually a good point. Double kill. But yeah, most of the jobs that are getting these like major reworks like this are, as Imia also said, they're mostly older jobs. Like, a lot of these jobs that are getting these reworks are getting them because they've basically been carrying this weight from wherever they were designed to now. And some of them have been carrying some sort of feature or mechanic that just doesn't really work that as well anymore, or they've figured out over years that they can't really add anything to. Or like, it just, like, anything they add just kind of seems to ignore it. So instead of, you know, just keeping it around, maybe just do something else. Like, for example, when they reworked Summoner, Summoner hadn't actually been dot-centric for, well, the last, like, proper dot addition they had was that their dots got upgraded to be stronger in Stormblood. They didn't add anything to it. Like, they made the duration longer, so you had to deal with it less, but they didn't add anything to it. And instead they had built on the Bahamut thing, like in Heavensward they gave you Dreadworm Trance, then Stormblood they reworked Dreadworm Trance and gave you Bahamut. Then in Shadowbringers they gave you Phoenix, which built on Dreadworm Trance. And it seemed like they had figured out this is what we want with Summoner, which would make sense, because they then, you know, with Endwalker took everything else, threw it out and went Dreadworm Trance though. So, like, it makes sense that some of these older jobs, Paladin, that got reworked recently, were carrying mechanics from A Realm Reborn. Almost. Monk, despite many changes it had received, it actually got, like, reworked, like, in steps, where they got rid of Greased Lightning as a maintained buff, and made it passive, and then they gave you Masterful Blitz, because without maintaining Greased Lightning, the job felt maybe a little bit hollow. Ron says, I imagine that the Pictomancer will be a lot like the old Summoner. With dots? Oh, by the way, Lexi, it didn't hurt me. Like, I just saw, oh, you used Super Polite, and then, like, if I was actually stressed, I would have given you the suggestion after the poll. I was just like, that was a little bit wasteful. And I said it because some gunbreakers do the thing that you did intentionally. Like, they say, I will use Super Polite, and then the first cooldown out the door, Super Polite, the instant they reach their destination, you're like, you have full HP! Why? Jacob says, I even forgot to mention I love to add an arm's length on every other pull. It's a good idea if you as a melee DPS can, like, get some aggro, if you can use some of your defensives. I've said the same in my 6 tips from melee DPS video. I did say that there's nothing, like, it's not bad if the melee DPS can, like, steal aggro for a little bit to help the tank. Especially if you're, like, a Reaper and you can use Arcane Crest to heal the tank as a result. Things like that. It also translates into your example of using arm's length. Hey Zach, hope you're doing well. Right. Next, we are doing level 90 dungeons. If you would like to join me for that, come on over to me. You just do like this. Is the other group... Was there another group made, and are they still inside? There was no other group. Okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I will say that part of the value in these daily hangout streams when I'm playing healer specifically is I have a sage specifically. I have a lot of room to like just watch and react, which is why I can like go, oh, you shouldn't have done that. So like that's a great point to learn from. Do you run dungeons normally, or do you do minimum item level no echo? We can unfortunately not do minimum item level no echo when we're doing roulettes. Like, that is not an option. I get what you mean, Chelsea. The point is that, and maybe you don't realize this, but if you're in the middle of an AoE pull, what are you using when you reach your destination? What are you using? Kiraholi, Panheimer here, or Heimer or Panheimer. That heals the DPS that got aggro as well. Oh, don't forget the Doton. So like that's free healing for that DPS. I forgot to put Cardia up. Whoops. If you're a white mage, you're using SIs when you get to your destination. You're an astrologian, you probably set something up. Or you put Earthly Star on the floor, so you're probably fine. You're a scholar, you probably put Sacred Soil on the floor. You use Whispering Dawn. So there's going to be some AoE healing, so is it really going to waste your resources? Like, yes, you're right. There are cases where it results in a resource waste because the person took so much damage that they didn't need to take. Like, yes, there are, like, extremes on both ends. But there is a reason why the best way you can approach an AoE pull is the tank goes until they reach their destination, and when they reach their destination, that's when we figure out whether you need to help the DPS. Usually the DPS fixes it by, you know, going to the tank. Depends on how long they hold them, Chelsea. Incidentally, melee DPS especially are actually quite tanky. But yeah, what I'm getting at is that DPS jobs are not made of paper mache. Even the mages can tank like 1 or 2 mobs for you for a bit. So that's why I'm saying there are extremes. Like, yes, if a DPS is just like they stop running and like just stand there and fight, then they'll die. But because they're running with the tank, hopefully, they're kiting the mobs the same as the tank is kiting the mobs when you're doing a big AoE pull. So it's probably fine. The problems arise when people stop moving. Like, that's really when it becomes a problem. Oop. To the right. But I do understand the frustration and the potential fear in that situation, especially if you're used to having, like, maybe the rest of the group get mad at you if they die or something, even though it was them who messed up. Like, that's a classic I've heard a lot, is that healers that are afraid or annoyed by DPS doing something that makes them take more damage than they need to, specifically because they have had bad experiences with being blamed for something. And that's that's understandable. The unfortunate reality there is, of course, that doesn't matter whether the reality is that they were in the wrong for being mad at you. They still, like, were rude and mean as a result. And see, Traverse, that one I don't understand. The DPS gain from getting 1 Toxicon is incredibly small, and the potential DPS loss for the rest of the group from having the mobs split randomly between the healer and the tank can be a lot bigger. Now the keyword being can. And that's the classic, right? That's the classic, is that because the DPS loss is rooted in the mob spreading all over the place and not in, like, actual DPS loss, it can be difficult to calculate exactly how much loss it is, but it can be a loss. And depending on the tank, if you don't know the tank when you do this, the tank might just get annoyed. And, you know, you have an annoyed player in your group, that can sometimes make weird things happen. Hey, Pendragon, hope you're doing well. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you. Oh yeah, that's I think Chelsea that we're not disagreeing necessarily, because in that particular situation you're explaining, like if the tank isn't good at using the mitigation, you might need to like use all of your resources on helping the tank. So that means that if you don't have the spare resources to also heal the DPS, then the DPS doesn't get healing. Like that's pretty simple. Like that makes sense, right? But the key here is that if the tank is in such a dire situation and you need everything you can, like everything you can get to keep the tank alive, then the DPS taking a few hits for them is actually helping you. And there's a reasonable chance that that DPS wants you to ignore them. They'll try and stay alive. Like if it's a good DPS, they realize the tank is having a tough time. They're probably like similar to Jacob, which you know, tries to run ahead and sneak in arm's length as a melee DPS. But you can't know that if they didn't say something. So from your perspective, it might look like they're an idiot, right? It's the same as the thing I talked about in my tanks from a healer's perspective video. That warrior who's holding Bloodwedding until they're like nearly dead looks the same as the warrior they're not holding anything. They're not going to use any defensive cooldowns. They're going to die if you don't do something. Looks the same until you see the Bloodwedding get used. Enjoy your meeting, Traverse, if you can. Brontom says, there have been times I, as a tank, have seen healers keeping me alive no problem, so I ease down on my cooldowns. As a healer, I get annoyed, and I'm seeing this more now. This is actually a very interesting point. Because some healers, they're rare, and they kind of fall under the healer god complex thing I've talked about before. Not exactly, but those that go, oh, normally I don't need to do more than X healing, so if you can't survive on that, then that's your problem. And then they don't heal more than that. That's like the, that's one example of like the perspective, right? That like, oh, I have to work harder because you're slacking. That's like the ultimatum of the I'm mildly annoyed that the tank is slacking, right? On the other end, there are tanks that go, well, if you heal me more, then I don't have to use defensive cooldowns, so I'm not going to. And that is, of course, the tank god complex. That is like the two oppositions. In your case, what you experience is, as a tank, you go, well, I feel like it's almost pointless that I'm using these cooldowns because I'm basically taking no damage anyway, but what is actually happening might be that the healer's working a little harder. And that's why, like, my perspective is to, like, use your cooldowns as best you can anyway. Like, it doesn't matter whether the tank needs it or the healer needs it. You just do, like, you use your cooldowns effectively, and then if you both do that, then this is going to be a breeze. the amount of healing that tanks theoretically need in level 90 dungeons is 0. That's not correct, Matthew. That is not correct. But whether the heals are free or not doesn't make them less significant. Hey Velk, hope you're doing well. I mean, Matthew, I feel like you're missing a point here. You've seen me solo dungeons as a warrior. How do I do that? I do it by utilizing strategies that would be incredibly inconvenient and inefficient in a normal group. Like, yeah, I technically don't need anyone. I don't need a healer or a DPS from any of those dungeons. I just need to be allowed to run, like, a gauntlet. Like, run 5 miles while also doing Tower of Zot. You know? So, like, going, oh, well, you can beat the duty without a healer. Yeah, you can. But you usually have to get quite creative. Like, sometimes you have to get creative with it, especially if you're not a warrior. Like, if you're a Dark Knight, then you might need to get quite creative. Or your group needs to do very good damage. Like, the way that a Dark Knight gets away with not needing to, like, needing a healer in a dungeon like Fell Court of Troya, because I have done Fell Court of Troya with Gazel tanking as Dark Knight. I was White Mage and I hardly needed to heal him. Right? Hardly needed to. How did that happen? Well, Gazel's really good at maintaining their and using their cooldowns, and they also got like a 7-second stun every pull. So it's complicated. Yeah, exactly, Gazel. I don't need help from anyone, except can you open the door for me? Remember to have a wall behind you for the knockback. But yeah, what I'm getting at, Matthew, is not to say, oh, you're wrong. It's more to say, there exists players that play the different tanks that can do a dungeon, a trial, a raid, an ultimate. Without a healer. Doesn't mean that all of them can. And I'm sure you're all like that. We're totally on the same page with this. Matthew says, I'm responding to healers who only do the required amount of healing, and that's 0. That's an interesting point. And that is probably also the reason why they become those, like, quote-unquote god complex healers, because, like, the thing is, the way that you notice... Oh, I actually forgot to refresh my sticker game here. The way that these problems arise is because if you have, like, a white mage, for example, who's like, well, normally, if I put Regen and Divine Benison on you and put, like, down Asylum... then I don't need to cast any more healing, usually, other than a benediction every now and then. So I won't do any more than that. I'll also spend all of my lilies between pulls. And then one day they have a few rounds where they don't even need to use Asylum because they had an even better tank. They're like, well, I guess I don't need to do that either. And like they just like move the bar further and further down until they reach the point they're like, well, I don't need to do anything. And then they get weirded out when they have a tank where they have to do something. But they've gotten really, really well acquainted with not having to do anything. So that's where the problems arise. And that's especially problematic when some tanks don't need the heal at all. Yeah, Hugo says, not that the DPS is bad. As a warrior, I would have died multiple times between my bloodwetting because too many mobs are still alive. See, exactly. And that is the reason why every time that we talk about defensive cooldown management on warrior, I'm like, use bloodwetting early. Not only does that mean you get bloodwetting again early, but it also indicates to the healer that you're using it on cooldown so the healer can plan around it. If they don't, then you have a lot of other cooldowns. And I usually don't have the problem of, oh no, if there's too many mobs alive, I'll die before I can use bloodwetting again. But that's because I play warrior as if my defensive cooldowns matter. Like I play tank and healer as if what Matthew is saying is wrong. And what Matthew is saying in this case is I'm responding to healers who only do the required amount of healing, and that's 0. I'm acting as if there is a required amount of healing and it's reasonably high. And if you play like the enemies are actually dangerous, then they magically stop being dangerous. Just magically poofs out of existence all that danger because you're prepared. It might mean that you're losing a slight amount of DPS because, oh, you could have used Vengeance when all the mobs were alive. But you could also have wiped. Which would have been hilarious. Gazel says, usually we only focus on the tank, but how good the DPS are also related to how much healing is needed as when the pull drags on too long and such. And that is correct. Indeed. Hey Fila, hope you're doing well. And hey Steve, hope you're doing well as well. This is something, I'm sure some of you have seen it, but I made this video where I specifically talked about, usually people remember it by the you pull it, you tank it video. The entire point of that video is that no one is the god of the group. No one is so holy and precious. Nice, Phil. It's been a while since you've been in a stream, I'm pretty sure. Hope you're doing well. Like, no one is so important and precious that they get to decide everything for the group. Because the healer can't kill the mobs by healing them to death. Obviously, the healers could just attack, right? That's going to be hard if there's no tank. Well, the tank needs a healer, usually, unless it's a warrior, then they might not. But, as others have mentioned, a warrior can also tire out of cooldowns if they're alone. And you will eventually tire out. Like, the entire thing that I've demonstrated in the solo challenge videos is that, well, while bloodwetting lasts, I'm actually unkillable. But I have to kite if I'm like, well, I can't actually survive until bloodwetting. Then in a normal group, what happens is the tank either A, dies, or B, the healer heals them. In a solo situation, your options are 1, wipe, and 2, run. That's all you can do. Like, those are your options. That's it. And the reason why this rarely happens is because, well, the DPS is usually good enough that you can kill the pack in time. Like, that's exactly what I've observed, and I've talked about a little bit on previous streams, actually, that I've noticed that there is no need for a second major cooldown backup. That is to say, it's pretty common that people go like, you know, like, Heart of Corundum, when that runs out. Nebula, when that runs out. Heart of Corundum, when that runs out. Then you have, like, Camouflage, or you even do Reprisal Arm's Length. Like, you know, like, extra big cooldowns. But the weird thing is that for most tanks, like, in your average dungeon pool, you don't need more than Bloodwetting, Vengeance, Bloodwetting. Or Holy Sheltron, Sentinel, Holy Sheltron. Or TBN and Shadow Wall into, like, Oblation and TBN. Like, you don't need more than, like, 2 waves. And if you need more than that, there's usually something else going on. And that means you can, like... And this is, like, just a bonus that I've, like, decided to do as a result of this observation, is that you can often, like, put some of those bigger cooldowns more up front. Like... You can combine Vengeance with Reprisal. You can combine Rampart with Arm's Length and things like that if you feel like it would help. Because like if the mobs are dead before your second Bloodwetting ends, then you're not going to be using Arm's Length anyway. VX says, oh, a warrior still needs to press Bloodwetting. Indeed, I've met that warrior as well. I actually had a run somewhat recently with a warrior that seemed to only know how to use Bloodwetting among the defensive cool. Like, Bloodwetting they used quite aggressively. The rest of the cooldowns were panic buttons for some reason. Like, if they dropped low enough, they started using defensives. But that was really low. Hey, Warcraft Traveler, hope you're doing well. Next, we're doing 5, 6, 7, 8. If you want to join me for that, come on over to me. Maybe it becomes a passive... And could you imagine if they got passive Bloodwetting? Could you imagine that? The TBN only Dark Knights, they're rare. Those are rare. Like, I feel like it's much more likely that you meet Dark Knights that don't know what TBN is. Oh, no, they know. Alright, Emir, see you later. Like, Dark Knights that act like they don't even know what TBN is. Or they do know, but they're like, well, that's a DPS loss. And you're like, have you read the tooltip? And that's perfectly fine, Lexi. I would actually prefer when we do these groups where I'm playing Sage, if anyone wants to tank, it would be really good if it's whoever feels the least confident as a tank, so that they can practice. But I don't want to force anyone. So if you're like used to tanking but not with a specific tank, then this is a great opportunity because, well, I'm not going to fail. TBN has a 1-minute cooldown, right?
Welcome to the final days of Amalur.
Is that a challenge? Maybe. Ari says, I had a Siren Song C run where I was playing Scholar, and the big pull after the second boss warrior used Holmgang and Ron's vision right at the end.
The fabric of our star began
But instead of overpower, they hit Tomahawk. We almost wiped, whereas I shielded the samurai constantly while they bloodbathed and used Third Eye. That is a good samurai. Like, not that they could do very much, but at least they stood their ground. Like, at least they stood their ground. If I remember correctly, the next pack dies either when you kill a mob or when you kill the stalker specifically. I'll play the broken gear tank and expect you to keep me alive. Well, I mean, you have to be wearing something. Looks like it's the stalker specifically. Hey, Angel. Hope you're doing well. Here's a tip, by the way. If the detonator is stunned when it dies, then it doesn't seem to explode. And I say it doesn't seem to explode because I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while since I've managed to pull it off. What can happen is that if you stun it just right, you can make the stacking debuff that makes the explosion more painful disappear. So it explodes for very little damage. Same, Sav. Same. Every time I get in this duty, if I see anyone start running away with the mobs, I'm like, come back! Don't run! Like, as a healer, I will even rescue them back to the pack, if that's what it takes. Because it actually makes things more dangerous if they just run away with it. You missed the fish, Angel. Oh.
Just as prayer gives rise
Enjoy
to
your evening,
Christ,
or enjoy your night,
God's
Chester.
remnant
Thank you so
manifests
much for coming.
deepest fears.
Hey, Patrick. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I don't know, Punk Fiddler. The thing is that the old style of cards just doesn't, like, the thing is, they wouldn't work very well in today's Final Fantasy XIV. The thing is, the crit card would be fine, the damage card would be fine, the Spire doesn't do anything, and Ewa is basically pointless. You don't need it. And the damage reduction card would most of the time feel like it would just be, it's a DPS loss, technically. And the speed card, genuinely, some players would actually rather you didn't give it to them because of how, like, specific rotations have become these days. That was the worst rescue in existence. Did I move you 2 inches? I clicked the wrong button. Pendragon says, what is Noct Sect? Never heard of it. Before Endwalker, astrologians had sects they could use. You may have heard of Neutral Sect. Neutral Sect allowed you to use both sects at once, and you might be wondering, is that why Neutral Sect makes your aspected things apply shields? And yes, that's right. That is absolutely the thing. In Shadowbringers, and before Shadowbringers for that matter, you had access to Diurnal Sect and Nocturnal Sect, which gave you... I have to take this one. Diurnal Sect made your aspected spells, like Aspected Benefic and Aspected Helios, and things like Celestial Opposition and Celestial Intersection, do a heal over time effect, with specifically Intersection applying a shield, like it does now. Nocturnal Sect made your aspected benefic cost more MP, like it switched from 400 MP to 1000 MP, but it applied a shield instead. And the same to, like, it basically flipped it so that the spells you have as an astrologian that applies a heal over time effect now applies a shield, and the thing that applies a shield applies a heal over time effect. So, like, you could switch between being a heal over time healer or a barrier healer. This made sense back then because there were only 3 healer jobs, and one of them was a barrier healer and one was a heal over time healer. So the third one, of course, had to be able to be a switch, right? The funny thing is that, as far as I know, based on every astrologian that I saw in, like, Shadowbringers, Nocturnal Sect was like the secondary. Like, if you already had a white mage, or you had another astrologian that had already switched to Diurnal Sect, then you switched to Nocturnal Sect. But in all other situations, you played Diurnal Sect, because, incidentally, barrier healers, if they could choose to have a heal over time effect, they might a lot of the time, because it meant more value for the MP. So when they added Sage, they removed the astrologian's ability to switch, because there was no need for that. Will Astrologian get its sects back when you get a 5th healer? Interesting question. Will we get a 5th healer? Oh, did someone stun it? Looks like someone stunned it. Bob at least took 0 damage from it. But I hope that that explains it for you, Pendragon. There's the possibility that if they add a 5th healer, that they'll just make sure that the 5th healer is the one that can switch. Because Astrologian was the 3rd healer added, so it made sense for that one to be the switch. But that is actually the funny thing with Astrologian, is that newer players that never saw Diurnal or Nocturnal Sect will look at Neutral Sect and be like, oh, okay. Remember to not stand outside of the blob. Bring the detonator to the blob. Makes it easier. Kind of seems like they don't know what they want Astrologian to be. I feel like it might be a case of being caught in a decision that maybe they wouldn't have made. Like, I wonder if we could get a straight answer on that. I wonder if the development team would not have made Astrologian today. You know what I mean? Like, Astrologian was really, really random in Heavensward and Stormblood, and then it's just like been forced into this less RNG random situation because that's kind of where the game went.
Yet this is far from the worst of it. Come, and I will show you.
Kieran says, I wonder if things like this are why they're reworking Astrologian and Dawntrail. Possibly. They haven't made a new healer in 9 years, so who knows what they would do. Has it been... I mean, I guess if you make the claim that Sage doesn't count. I think, actually, Matthew, that you might be onto something there. By the way, hey, Darth. Hope you're doing well. You might be onto something there, Matthew. If you have the requirement that healers have to be attacking, like they are here, how much space do you have to make, like, a new, creative, and unique healer? Like, how would you do that?
The star was fading. We saw we had to weave its laws anew.
With like, the situation that we do have, like, what would you do? And, like, also remember, like, keeping in mind that we have things like energy drain, which has demonstrated that giving healers the option to choose between damage and healing, optimization will eventually potentially force you to choose damage. Which means that it makes extremely good sense that whatever healer they might design in the future, they don't want that healer to have to make that choice because they know how it will go down. Emily says, I'm still hoping we get a healer that focuses on HOTS. You know, the funny thing is that pure healers are supposed to be that, I'm pretty sure. But it feels like barrier healers are the ones that do that more, doesn't it?
But between us and our goal loomed a final misbegotten fiend.
It's really, really backwards in a way. Yeah, with the way that healers are right now in Final Fantasy XIV, and how, like, jobs are in Final Fantasy XIV to some extent, if you make a healer, it has to be attacking basically every GCD, and if it for some reason isn't, then when it is attacking, it has to be able to do enough damage to compensate, because it's competing with the other healers who are attacking all the time. That's not a good sign. That's going to be very hard to make unique. Exactly, Kieran. Not only do the barrier healers get a proper, like, quote-unquote regen effect sooner than the pure healers, but the barrier healers actually rely on their heal over time effect more than the pure healers. And at higher level, it's the barrier healers who are using, like, Karakoli and Sacred Soil all the time for heal over time effects. Meanwhile, the pure healers are looking at it like, well, that's a DPS loss, so I'm not doing that. Indeed, Brontom, and that is actually another thing that, because the barrier healers feel like the fact that they have more, like, better OGCD healing options earlier on makes it almost feel like the intended design is that the pure healers have to commit more to healing. Which again, that causes some problems. Because, well, you have to attack all the time, and if you're not, then I sure hope that whenever you do attack, you can compensate. Hugo says, I think the shield versus region strictly refers to GCDs. Possibly. Possibly. But the fact that we can observe more similarities than that, Hugo, almost makes it seem like there are other aspects that are associated with a pure or barrier healer. Because until they add, it's the same as mages. Right now, we have 2 mages that can rest and 1 that can't, which means that black mage is the black sheep. Incidentally, it's actually not a black mage, it's a black sheep. When Pictomancer comes in and does not have rest, because we've been told they don't, then we have 2 types of mages. We have the ones with rest and those without rest. That's like a similar like A versus B as the different healers. So for example, barrier healers, incidentally, they always have some sort of passive healing that is managed in some way, with EOS versus Cardia. Pure healers, well, they have, like, for example, a bigger cooldown heal that doesn't cost a resource, whereas the barrier healers have 3 charges of a resource. But this is complicated. That is part of the reason why it's hard to put them in boxes. That is also why when I talked about what a healer is in, I believe, the video Healers from a Tank Perspective, there were some people that were like, are you saying that the barrier healer is the one with the HOTS? Because that's wrong. And yes, some people actually said that in comments. And I was like, have you read the tooltips of a barrier healer? And sometimes they were actually like, no, I'm a pure healer main. Like, so you're saying that the pure healer is the one with the HOTS without ever checking if the barrier healers also have them. And in fact, maybe there's a better in some way. They're not better. They're more easily accessible. But it is that is of course also what I mean by saying that when we get if we get a 5th healer in Final Fantasy XIV someday, if we get a 5th healer in Final Fantasy XIV someday, that will probably be the time where we actually see some real changes, because right now, Sage is actually a really good example of, with the current design of healers that we have right now, how much space is there for something unique? And the kind of requirements and expectations of healers that we have right now, the kinds of expectations and requirements we have of all jobs, actually, can make it hard to make something new. Which is a little strange, I know. Like, if you add a 5th healer... If you add a 5th healer... Then... it has to do about as much damage as the other healers. It has to provide as much damage as the other healers. And it has to be as good at healing as the other healers. Otherwise, there's a problem. And it has to be able to heal in the same way as the other healers. And that's where it starts to get really, really boring, doesn't it? Maybe a healer that reverses damage? An interesting idea. I feel like they've toyed a little bit with that with Astrologian's Macrocosmos. Matthew says, how much damage do you need to take before Kera is better than Regen? Kera beats 1 cast of Regen if... So if we assume that the full heal goes through, right? The full heal goes through, then Regen heals for 1500 potency, but it's a GCD, and Karakoli heals for 500 potency per target, which means Karakoli wins if 3 players need healing. Exactly, all of that at every level bracket, Matthew, indeed. If you are taking damage, then the question, like, then it becomes a really difficult calculation, because you need to figure out how much is 100 potency of healing. Because if we're saying how much damage does the tank need to take before Karakoli is better than Regen, well, then the tank needs to take approximately 1000 healing potency worth of damage. Well, actually 10,000 potency worth of 10,000 healing potency worth of damage, because you're only blocking 10% of it. So if we take it from there, how much do you heal per tick? Around 3,300, right? At my gear, in my gear, if we ignore the fact that you could crit with a tick, then 1000 potency worth of healing would be, or actually 10,000 potency worth of healing would be 330,000. So for Regen to lose to Karakoli, if we ignore the part where Regen is a GCD and Karakoli is an OGCD and all that, then Lexi, for example, would have to take like 2.5 times their full HP in damage in a 15-second time frame, by the way, for Karakoli to like win. The reason why Karakoli wins by default is because the question is, what's better, using Regen or using Karakoli and Doses, or and Dyscrasia, or and Phlegma? And, well, one of these options have damage attached to it, and the other does not. You could go, well, I could use As-Eyes. Well, you could use As-Eyes with Aflato's Misery, so... So that's why it becomes difficult. Pendragon says something about being confused between off-tank and main tanking. Right. Let's talk about that for a moment. I talk about this in my 6 tips for tanks video a little bit. Basically, I talk a lot about, like, actually how to pull things. Turns out that's a really important aspect of being a good tank. If you want to main tank, and there's more than one tank, one of the most effective ways to signal that, without even saying anything, is when you zone into the duty, you turn on your tank stance. It's extra good if you turn on your tank stance. Like, you deliberately make sure you don't have it on, you zone in, and then you turn it on. Because sometimes people, they just have their tank stance on because they did a dungeon just a moment ago. They queued into this and they didn't get scaled down, so they still have their tank stance on. Maybe they don't actually want to main tank. But if you're zoning in and you immediately turn on your tank stance, you're essentially saying, well, I want to tank now. Like, I want to be the main tank. The second way to do it is to use human words and go, I would like to main tank. Is that all right? Name of the other tank. And sometimes they'll say something. Sometimes they'll just not turn their tank stance on. Whatever it is. If they want to main tank, then you, of course, have a problem. If you want to off-tank, one really effective way that you can, avoid main tanking is not having your tank stance on and not putting it on. In fact, that is a very effective way to signal the opposite, is if you enter duty, your tank stance is on as you enter and you turn it off. Then you have deliberately stated, oh, I was tanking before, but now I don't want to anymore. But someone has to do it. So if the other tank also does not put on their tank stance, then maybe you have to do it. If you're indifferent towards like main or off tanking, then usually giving it a moment, seeing if the other tank turns on their tank stance, and if they don't, you turn on yours. That's it. Like that's the discussion. The easiest way to do this is don't aim to be main tank with randoms. Like, wait, see what they do. If they don't seem to jump at the opportunity, you go. And to then the follow-up question is often, so what does an off tank do? Because naturally the main tank does what a tank does in a dungeon. Easy. The off tank, it's funny when you're both indifferent. That is absolutely true. It's extra funny when both of them then turns on their tank stance simultaneously. But the off tank, what they do is, well, they try to support, the intended behavior is that you try to support the main tank, meaning that you, for example, pick up ads, deal with them, or if you don't have anything else to do, you can, like, if you have any defensive cooldowns, you can share with the main tank. Like, for example, if you're a Dark Knight, you could use your TBN for the main tank if they're taking a tank buster. Don't do it if the main tank is also a Dark Knight. They don't stack. But things like that, you can, like, give a little help. You use reprisal when something is coming up. You use your raid-wide defense when something is coming up. And most importantly of all these things, if the main tank dies, you're now the main tank. At least, for now. Maybe the other tank tries to take over again, but until then, and maybe even after then, you're now the main tank. Congratulations, you've been promoted. I prefer to try and save the main tank. So if the main tank is about to die, provoke, take over, and try to save them, right? Some people don't understand that, and then they die. But yeah, consider that. Try to, like, basically you're there to support the main tank. But aside from that, you're essentially in casual content, you're glorified DPS. You're just an extra DPS until something comes up where you can help. Yeah. Phil says, I had a trial where the standoff took 3 minutes before one of the healers finally decided to pull and one of the tanks used their stance. That's a long time. 3 minutes? Are you sure it was 3 minutes? I can't imagine waiting like that long. I would have pulled by then, or just been like after like 20 or 30 seconds, would have been like, all right, tanks, can we make a decision? Or is none of you tanking? Like, what's going on here? Right. Next up, we're doing leveling roulette. If you'd like to join for leveling roulette, come on over to me. I'll go over here on this table. Did Jacob want to join for that? Like they were just back a moment ago. I'm just checking. Thank you for the reminder. Could you get a tank on all 3 corners and like actually spin the boss? I mean, if you're main tanking, if you just run really close, you can cause them to spin really fast anyway. Nice one, Catch. So much death. That's That sounds like the classic. Like if you have the aggro of the boss, if you just run all the way up to them like this, and just like run around them like this, they'll spin really fast. Don't do it. You can, but don't do it. Congratulations, you have now earned this knowledge. Now don't use it for evil, right? 78 deaths. Well, it sounds like a huge amount, but that's like 3 wipes and a bit. Guy out of context moment, how to turn the boss into a Beyblade. Let's Beyblade! Velk says, do you ever use Noema? Yes, I do. I cannot demonstrate it in this one because I don't have it. But one way you can make regular use of Noema in normal content is really silly. Extremely silly, in fact. And it's because it's a DPS gain on AoE. Oh, nice. Recycle that Doton. Basically, on AoE, you can run into a position where you can like shoot the Noema laser through the entire pack. The reason why Noema is a DPS gain on AoE is because so Dyscrasia does 170 at max level, right? Toxicon does 330, but 50% less on secondary targets, which means that it's technically slightly less damage per target, but it does more than Dyscrasia in total because the primary target takes more damage. Noema does 330, but only 40% less on secondary targets, which means that it actually does more damage than Dyscrasia on secondary targets. Which means you can use it for that. That's of course an offensive use of Noema, right? So that's probably not what you're looking for, Velk. If that's not what you're looking for, then the other way you can use Noema is you can use it as a quote-unquote panic button. Because Scholar and Sage both have this weakness that they don't have things like Benediction or 2 charges of Essential Dignity. So it can be difficult if the tank drops really low. What I usually do there, if I have a questionable tank where I don't know if they're actually safe, I'll save Noema just in case. And what you can do then is you use, like, when you're going to use Noema, you weave Zoe and then you use Noema. That adds 50% extra potency to Noema. That makes it heal for way more. Like, it's not like it doesn't become a benediction. Minsal, is that a question or is it a statement? Because I just said that. I just said it in a more exact way. Hey Owen, hope you're doing well. Actually, I'm guessing Aridel, did you send the mistakes tanks make video? Okay, thank you. And hey, Ivana, hope you're doing well. Perfect. Thank you, Ardell. So the story with Toxicon is that Dyscrasia does 170 potency, right? Toxicon does 330 to the main target and then half of that to the secondary targets. That means that it does 165 to secondary targets, which of course means that that's less than Dyscrasia, but it has an advantage of 165 potency on the first target. So each target after the first, Dyscrasia gains 5 potency on Toxicon, but it has to like beat like 33 targets or something before it actually beats Toxicon. But that's sort of that's irrelevant if you use Toxicon with your primary target or whatever dies first anyway, right? Because you're concentrating the damage on the thing that dies first anyway, so you're possibly losing damage, because that would have died to other AoE anyway. That's why it's complicated. Neuma is the same, except Neuma actually does more damage on the secondary targets than Dyscrasia, which is the reason why that one is like a more safe selling point, you could say, because that one, like, if you don't need the healing, then, I mean, the damage is objectively your best AoE attack, aside from, like, Flemmer, right? So it's okay. But it is a little complicated. That is why you might not want to use Toxicon in that way. Partly because also, if you're using Toxicon on AoE now, results in you missing an adder sting for a movement section on the boss fight coming up or something, then that means you're losing a doses cast later, which you might not want. Like, the potency gain from using Toxicon on AoE is so minuscule that if you using Toxicon on AoE means that you lose a doses on single target, you've lost the potential gain like that. So that's why you might not want to do that. But Neuma is fine. And don't worry about it, Mensal. I'm not trying to chew you out. I'm just trying to explain, because it is a confusing subject. I've had people both say that Toxicon is not something you should use it on AoE ever, and I've had people that say Toxicon is objectively a DPS gain. I've had, I think it was a troll, but I had someone in the comment section of one of my videos claim that Toxicon was actually an OGCD. So that was fun. Some of you might have seen. I think Gazel saw it. I ended up deleting their comment. Because they kept insisting on it. It is in PvP at least. That's true. But, you put that on a PvE video. Toxicon is an OGCD on GCD. Ha. That's pretty good. Brontome, Toxicon is damage neutral on single target at level 82 and above. Matthew says, I saw that, avoided the temptation to respond. Have you even played this game? See, the thing is, when I get those kind of trolls, right? I am in the position of being a more public-facing name. So I don't want to chew anyone out. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them a chance to not feel like I'm chewing them out. I want everyone to feel welcome. But I can't control what you all say to the troll. So when I see this kind of stuff happen, I sometimes just, like, continue the battle, hoping someone else swoops in to tell them what's up. But eventually, like, if they get too mean, like, the thing is, if they're mean to me, there's a much higher bar before I'll I'll delete their comment. Like, if they're saying it in a somewhat respectful way, of course. But like, they can disagree with me all they want. But if they start getting mean to other people that are just commenting, that's the fastest way to get hidden on the channel. Like, that is the speed run of becoming invisible in the comment section. Is if you're mean to the other people responding, especially the polite people responding. That's pretty much the main reason why I ended up hiding them. Was because they were starting to get kind of toxic to other people. Oh yeah, Traverse, I have done this dungeon a lot. I know exactly that you, like, if you just toad quickly on 5 stacks, you will not die. So, like, I wasn't being distracted. I knew exactly what I was doing. Yep, that is correct, Velk. It is... Toxicon is... like, using your creation diagnosis to get adder stings is still a DPS loss, because if you use your creation diagnosis or prognosis and you get an adder sting, then it still takes you 2 GCDs in total to use the adder sting, like from a damage perspective. But if you needed the barriers, then that's a completely different story. Oh, I think I got hit. Nope, apparently not. Here's a fun fact. So often people don't even realize you can do that. If you walk up to, like, the treasure coffer, right on the edge there, you can actually shoot down on the pack here to pull it. I don't recommend doing that, because it just confuses a tank most of the time. I don't recommend doing that, but you can. This treasure coffer holds a rare grimoire. Hmm. Just to reiterate on that, using your, like, fishing specifically for Toxicons, there's no point in doing that on AoE or single target, because just using Dyscrasia twice is more damage than using your creation anything, like your creation any barrier into Toxicon. And that, of course, also applies for 2 doses. Like, that is the logic there. It's a completely different story if you needed the barrier or the healing. So that is something that is worth keeping in mind. Is that if you need the healing or the barrier, then it is completely irrelevant whether it is a DPS loss or not. Right? Like, that is something... like, that... like... It can be easy to forget these things with how much we often focus on maximum damage also on the healer. We're all just DPS of different colors. But if you need the healing, then it doesn't matter that it's a DPS loss. Hey, Counter you. Hope you're doing well. A melee DPS for a newer player. Also, enjoy your evening, Rust. It's really awkward with melee DPS because the generally considered easiest melee DPS is Reaper, but it starts at level 70. So that can be a bit overwhelming in its own right, and, you know, if you're a newer player, might even not even have a level 70. Samurai is a good one as well, but that one starts at level 50, so again, you might not want that. Of the easily accessible, like, low-level melee DPS, I would say that at the start, Dragoon is really basic. Like, it's the simplest of among Dragoon, Monk, and Ninja. But it is worth keeping in mind that Dragoon becomes really, really difficult at higher level. Whereas I don't know if I would say whether like Ninja and Monk, of course, also become more complicated at higher level, but Dragoon feels like it like flatlines at low level and then suddenly just goes. Monk is like faster paced, which can make it feel more difficult to learn. But I suppose if you're looking for something like middle of the ground, like middle of the pack in difficulty, then Monk might not be the worst one. It has a really high skill ceiling, though. But it is surprisingly forgiving on mistakes. So, yeah. If you're looking for something middle of the pack, then Monk is probably a good choice. Hope you can use that, kind of you. There's also the part that if you do play Monk, then at level 50 you can use most of the same equipment on Samurai if you choose to try that later. And if you are a newer player on the free trial, it is worth keeping in mind that Reaper is not available on the free trial, but Samurai is. So that also could make a difference, or be important. Zab says, remembering where I was on Monk rotation is my issue with it. Yeah. This is actually something that is quite weird with Monk. I think I've talked about this before, but when you're doing like a higher level rotation on Dragoon, for example, you mostly only have to think about which sequence you're doing for the GCD, like every time you finish a set. Like you just go, alright, now I'm doing the Heaven's Thrust combo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm doing the Chaotic Spring rotation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like every fifth GCD you have to actually go, okay, what am I doing next? And the obvious answer is the one you didn't do. With Reaper, it doesn't matter, it's just 1, 2, 3. Like it's just, if I have nothing else to do, I do 1, 2, 3. With Samurai, well, you can check your stickers. You just, like, you finish a combo and go, which sticker do I make next? And Ninja's, like, every time you reach Armor Crush and Aeolian Edge, you check your futon timer, and that's it. But with Monk, you're like, okay, do I have Leaden Fist? do I have this, like, should I refresh Disciplined Fist now? How's Demolish doing? And the thing is, it's not that difficult. It's, you know, it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, like, right? Like it's really like it's reasonably manageable that you just like you can go into each set knowing exactly what you're supposed to do. But the fact that you have the freedom to choose on every step can give the effect of you both combined with the freedom to choose, but also the fact that the rotation goes a bit faster can cause it to be harder to keep track of what you're supposed to do next. But honestly, it might be easier to play Dragoon if you just, like, before you start a set, you go, okay, this time I'm doing this and this and this. And then you just commit to it, instead of, like, thinking it per GSD, because then it can get a little bit really convoluted, mainly because unless you have, like, your buffs and debuffs down here, you're going to be like, follow my mouse, do I have Leaden Fist up? Do I have Disciplined Fist up? Is Demolish active? Do I have Leaden Fist? You're just doing this. I mean, Kanojo, if you think Ninja looks interesting, then it's just about, like, getting into it. As others mentioned, it has quite a high, like, learning curve right at the start, but it's a lot about, just getting that figured out, and then Ninja's, like, super bursty. Like, you just go full blast, just, like, smash all of your buttons on your keyboard, and then you're, like, just standing there for a bit, waiting for your cooldowns. If you feel that it is very difficult, remember that I do have a starter guide for Ninja and a high-level guide, and the starter guide, I actually spent a lot of time on the hard part. You know, we talk about openers, we talk about bursts, we talk about how to memorize the mudras and things like that. How to remember how to use Doton. And as you go up to the higher level part of the guide, I also, like, talk about sequences that are easier when you want to use Tenchi Jin, the level 70 action, things like that. Like, why memorize more combinations when you don't need to? So if you think Ninja looks interesting, and the reason that you're not doing it is because you're a little scared, if you think Ninja is the most interesting of all the melee DPS, you will probably find it more entertaining to try that one first. Like, the worst that can happen is that you don't get it. Right? Like, that's the worst that can happen. And then you can just try something else. Punk Fiddler says, sorry in advance for asking. I haven't leveled Samurai up to this point. What's up with Kaiten that even in the official forums people are asking for it to return? So Kaiten was an OGCD that spent 20 Kenki. You learned it at level 52, by the way. That's why Shinten was moved from 62 to 52, and Kyuten was moved from 64 to 62. All it did was your next weapon skill does 50% more damage. That's what it did. And that means you used Higanbana or Midara Setsugeka or Tengagoken. Leading up to that, you used Kaiten, and then they did 50% more damage. Notably, I believe Midara Setsugeka had 800 potency at that time. It just didn't have a guaranteed crit. So you could get it to do 1200 potency by using Kaiten. And it also had a cool flourish that many people miss. But that's the reason that people liked having that flourish. And it was like a core part of the rotation. Like, remember, you got at level 52, so you unlocked Samurai, gained 2 levels, and now you had Kaiten. And that was like the core thing of the job, that whenever you used an Iai Jutsu, you used Kaiten and then Iai Jutsu. And you also used it before Ogi no Mikiri. Like, that was an additional one you added it to. See, so similar to old Darkside? I guess so. Old Darkside was really strange because Darkside has had 3 iterations. We are currently on the 3rd iteration, by the way. The 3rd iteration was, or is, when you use your edgy moves, you get 30 seconds of Darkside that increases your damage by 10%. The Stormblood iteration, which was the first one I actually experienced because I started the game in Stormblood, you toggled it, and its effect was you do 20% more damage, you can use your Dark Arts actions, which makes no sense, and it's a really long story, but the point is that the old version, the old way you spent your MP was through an action called Dark Arts, which improved your next action. It also allowed you to use Dark Mind when you were in Darkside. It also boosted your damage by 20%, just flat. The cost of using Darkside was that it stopped your passive MP regen and prevented MP regen from outside sources from helping you. So, an Astrologian giving you an Evo card didn't work. A Red Mage using Mana Shift on you, which gave you 20% of their mana, didn't work. Things like that. But you just clicked it. You just like, you switch to Dark Knight, click your tank stance, click Darkside, and then we go. Completely whatever, right? In Heavensward, as far as I have been able to discover, the way Darkside worked was you toggled it and it had a MP upkeep. So every few seconds it made you lose MP instead of gain. And it also had those other limitations, which meant that you had to like build up MP and then use Darkside in bursts. I imagine the reason why they removed this was because Darkside blocking you out of your defensive cooldowns because you didn't have MP to use it was a little bit of a problem, right? And see, Alex says, I have noticed the lack of self-heal on Paladin up to level 58, and even then it is not recommended to use it because on GCD. So, is Paladin compensating by more better mitigation, or what was the intent? Well, I'll take this question, and then we will, we'll do the next duty, by the way. So, the way this was, is that in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, there was this mechanic called cross-class actions, where you could use certain actions from other classes. So, as in, for example, Paladin had access to certain Conjurer spells, not White Mage, Conjurer. For example, Paladin could choose Cure 1 if they wanted it. They could choose Raise, they couldn't use it in combat, but they could choose to have Raise if they wanted it. But they had Cure 1, so they technically had a healing spell. When they in Stormblood, they could also choose Protect and Stone Skin, that's true. When they in Stormblood removed the cross-class actions, that meant that Paladin basically lost all the white magic from level 1 to 50. Because the white magic they got there was like Conjurer magic. So they lost any healing they had access to. It's not like Cure 1 was good. Like, Cure 1 isn't good today. It wasn't that great then either. Not on a Paladin, at least. But it was like the concept that Paladins technically had healing magic. And the reason why you get Clemency at 58 is just because that's like the Paladin heal, like the exclusive Paladin heal. Your suggestion that they have more or better mitigation is... It is true at max level, but not by much. As in, Paladin has the most and strongest defensive, like, actively damage reduction mitigation of all the tanks. They do have that, yes. But the other tanks also have, like, healing options and barriers and so on, so it isn't as clear of, like, oh, Paladin is, like, the one that just takes no damage. That's not how it works. The unfortunate reality of Paladin, Alec, is that Paladin is just weaker than the other tanks for a really long time because they're lacking this particular aspect of, like, they don't have healing as readily available as the other tanks. That doesn't mean that Paladin is bad. Right? Like, as I say so much, all jobs are viable. It's just that for a significant portion of the leveling experience, Paladin is like the weakest tank among the four at a given level. So it's complicated, but Paladin does recover from this. At level 84, they actually get access to regular healing. And yeah, also as Oscar says and as others say as well, as Sav said, Paladin does get a lot more mitigation early on because they get Sheltron super early. So Paladin has things going for it. The way I usually present it is among Warrior and Paladin, if you're starting as a new player, you want to tank. Warrior has the more complicated attack rotation because they have like resource stockpiling and there's some significance to the timing of their of their berserk and things like that. But to compensate, because they have like built-in healing and things like that, they don't have to worry as much about being perfect on their damage reduction. Meanwhile, Paladin, for like nearly 60 levels, like, Goring Blade is the first thing they get that starts to stray from this, but their GSD is basically just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's nothing else for so long, and their AoE is just 4, 5, 4, 5, right? If you do this 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, it's just 1, 2 combos, right? This gives the Paladin the breathing space to focus on their defensive cooldowns, which are then a little harder to use compared to Warrior. So it's like Warrior has a slightly more complicated attack rotation. Paladin has a simpler one, but its defensive system is harder at lower level. I hope that gives you some sort of answer to the question. Right. Next up, we are doing Trials Roulette. If you want to join me for Trials Roulette, come on over to me. Right, I'll do this, and then I'll find my list. Because I think we're 9. I think we're exactly 9. Right? No, wait. Yeah, we're 9. Yeah. The list is just showing the order that I've invited people earlier, which I've tried to make somewhat random when I've chosen people. Not like I'm not trying to play favorites here. The way that your data center travel is that you log out to your character selection screen, then you right-click your character name on the right, and then you choose data center travel. The link I posted is a short where I demonstrate how this is done, Pendragon. Hey Caetsu, hope you're doing well. You know, it is quite funny with that Terry, that you say the machinist is fine at level 80 or even 70, the last level is just whatever. A lot of jobs have this problem, I feel, in Endwalker, that you really get the impression that at level 80 they're like, I don't know what to add. Like, a lot of jobs just get like, level 82, one of your things get upgraded. Level 84, you get a potency boost. Level 86, one of your actions get changed to a different action. Level 88, you have a shorter cooldown on a thing. Level 90, you get one new thing. One. You take that, and you just check how many jobs that applies to. Like, just name a random job and see. It probably applies. And that's also true, Brontom. I remember back in Stormblood hearing, like, monk players and paladin players be like, I don't know what they should give us. We're not really missing anything, like, for the rotation. Like, I believe paladins would be like, it would be nice if we could have, like, some rotation healing. Like, that would be neat. Can they upgrade clemency? But monks were like, we don't really need anything. We're good. We're good. And then what did they give? What Paladin got was Atonement. I was like, well, before Atonement, they just did 2 Royal Authority combos per set. And to understand the per set thing, of course, you have to have see an old Paladin, I guess. And they also got the Confiteor, that's true. Like, they basically got an upgrade to their melee combo and an upgrade to their magic combo. And in Endwalker, they just upgraded their like, they just combined some of their magic combo and their melee combo and upgraded that and called it a day. They also upgraded Sheltron and Spirits Within. Then Erdel, Red Mage, you get an 8th continuation of your straight combo. Wascardia, that's a good point. Didn't seem like we needed it. Good night, Derby. Sleep well, at least. That's really what the cost of me being distracted talking about something else during a duty is that I forget about Cardia. Terry says Samurai feels absolutely fine at level 70. Disagree. I actually like Make Sure Shisui and Tsubame Gaishi having a second charge. Oh, look! Oh, never mind. It's a double tank buster! But then the boss died. That's true, Terry. Traverses, I feel like Paladin's an outlier in Endwalker where it doesn't feel complete until 84 for its self-sustain. Oh no, that's the thing, Traverse, is that Paladins were like offensively, we don't really need anything. Which makes it funny that it took 2 extra expansions before they actually got something defensively that they really wanted. Paladin's getting gap closer so late? Is it that bad? Let's see, 874, 62, 54, 50. I mean, it is the slowest one to get one, but is it that bad? Now we do normal race roulette. I'm just saying we're doing it because I can, like, I know Ardell prefers to sit out if we have already a full party, but there's no one else here. And yes, not only does make sure Shisui get 2 charges, Tsumame Gaishi gets 2 charges. And the nicest thing about having 2 charges on it means that you don't have to, like, use it immediately to not feel like you're, like, losing out on value. That is actually also part of the, like, that's the good version of why I would love it if more jobs, like more DPS jobs, got things like that. Like an extra charge on something. Like an extra charge on jump would be super nice. Because then, like, Dragoon doesn't have to, like, frantically use jump exactly on cooldown, but I know what's going to happen because it has the cooldown that it has. I imagine that what's going to happen is that you'll try to fit both jumps into the burst somehow. And that's what's going to happen. Like, that's what can happen with so many things, is that on the one hand, getting the second charge can make a job feel a lot less quote-unquote stressful. Because you don't have to use things exactly on cooldown. It will also make skill speed and spell speed less bad, because it doesn't matter that it doesn't align perfectly. But it will have the effect of, okay, well then we'll just stockpile 2 of them. Like, that's what often happens with charges, is that, well, we'll just use both in the burst then. Which is why it might not be good, ultimately. Look, it's Ed! With 2 Ds, it's double D. Jose goes DD. Hope you're doing well. Where are Ed and Eddie? That is an excellent question. Maybe they're driving Cruise Chaser. Ga 100. Gah! Ow. Phil wrote in game, I never got what that object was for in phase 1. I had a feeling that it, like, was that you were supposed to, like, stand behind it, but I don't feel like it actually helps. I don't know. I don't actually know. Are you doing damage from back there? What did Bob die to? It is a quite damage-intense fight. Especially if you're solo healing it. It seems like Jacob had to go for a little bit. Zav says, funny thing is, as Paladin, I never noticed the gap closer skill before I was 90. Really? It is funny, because the reason why I'm sort of completely indifferent towards gap closers like Intervene is because this is most prominent on Paladin and Gunbreaker, because they have, you know, a damage buff. You're put in the situation of, yes, you could use your gap closer, but what if you used it during your damage buff, though? Like, yes, it is a damage gain to use it to gap close if you need it, but most of the time you're using your gap closers during your burst, which means that it's rarely available when you need the gap closer. That's why I like it way more on Warrior and Dark Knight, because as they don't personally have any, like, temporary damage buffs, unless you're aligning with raid buffs, you can use those whenever. Jacob says, if only Repelling Shot had DPS so I could optimize damage. Funny story about that. Funny story about that. Once upon a time, Repelling Shot was a GCD. And it did damage. It did worse damage than Heavy Shot, but it did damage. But it was a GCD. Did you mean I don't want them usable outside of combat? I do agree with the potency should be removed from gap closers. I think so too. I think I've talked about this before. And here's a funny thing. Which gap closers in Final Fantasy XIV are used as gap closers? Mainly Icarus, Ethereal Manipulation, and Between the Lines, technically. Anavan, Hell's Ingress and Egress, Thunderclap, and Shikuchi. What do all these things have in common? Oh, right, it's that they don't do damage. Backflip is also kind of used as a mobility option. You know what's interesting about that is specifically that you have a version of it that isn't like a mobility option. But the thing is, every time you use engagement, you're technically using displacement, not for mobility. Oh yeah, Dragoon's backflip, sorry. For some reason I thought about Red Mage and not Dragoon. But yeah, Elusive Jump is actually also one. Gyutin. Sometimes. Thank you, Caetsu. Yaten is also sometimes used as a mobility option. And that is correct, Cranberry. Part of the reason why Gyutin can be used as a mobility option is because it isn't actually, like, it's damage neutral to do that. And because Samurai generates so much Kenki, it's not like you're losing anything by doing so. No one uses the Dragoon back jumping except for the Titan fight. Oh, people do use it. Here's an interesting thing. The reason why you don't see this happen very much is because this is equally as effective. That doesn't add anything. It doesn't help very much because the tank is already making sure that you get in range fast enough. That's why it doesn't happen as much. It's less flamboyant. That's true. Right. And next we are doing alliance raids. Exactly, Ostravi. That was also what the Cranberry said. Gyotun, the samurai gap closer, does the same amount of damage per Kenki as your regular spender Shinten. Which means that Shinten costs 25 and does 250, so it does 10 per Kenki. And Gyotun does 100 for 10, so it does 10 per Kenki. Right? Well, we're not getting a 90 alliance raid. Now we might get a 90 alliance raid. It depends on if everyone has it unlocked. But that's fine, whether we do or not. Oh. Should I give a countdown for you, Ardell? Or did you just want to cheer us on? Oh, you're cooking. Fair enough. I agree, Ostravi. Here's a fun fact. Before Endwalker, the way that Warrior's inner release worked... I can't remember if it was 10 or 12 seconds. But the way that it worked was that it made all of your beast gauge costs 0. And also made it so that all of your damage was critical direct hits for the duration. Back then, Upheaval cost 20 to use. It still had a 30-second cooldown, but it just meant that you had an upkeep of 20 beast gauge every 30 seconds. Onslaught, I believe, I can't remember if it cost 10 or 20, but it was absolutely not, like, good for potency. But because it made all of them free, also Onslaught didn't have a charge system back then, it just had a 10-second cooldown, but like Gyotun, it was actually back then, it was resource inefficient. So you didn't want to do it. But every time you used inner release, you just went Fell Cleave, Upheaval, Onslaught, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave, Fell Cleave. But you always used Upheaval and Onslaught in because they, you know, they became a critical direct hit. That was also why you needed some skill speed as a warrior, because that allowed you to fit an additional GZD inside. What do I mean with GZD? Of course I meant an additional Fell Cleave inside. What else would you put there? And the reason why that's interesting is because back then, for warriors, using Onslaught wasn't just a matter of, well, are you saving, like, GZD time? Like, can you get to the enemy closer? Because it cost a significant portion of a Fell Cleave to do. So did you want that? Like, was it actually worth it? Yeah, Decimate in AoE situations, indeed. We didn't even have Orogeny for AoE upheaval. But that was the same problem with Samurai for a time. Like, until they reworked it. Or removed Kaiten and stuff. That Gyotun was technically... Like, it wasn't as big of a DPS loss, but it was particularly funny in the level 51 to 61 range. Remember that back before they removed Kaiten, Samurai wanted to use Kaiten every time they used an EI Jutsu. Now, the thing is, you generated 5 Kenki from your 3-step combos and 10 from the Yukikaze combo in the level range of 52 to 61. So you had enough Kenki to use Midare Setsu Gekka with Kaiten. But you wanted to use it on Higanbana as well. Like, that was actually more value, so you wanted to do that. But in that level range, you got Kaiten, Gyotun, Yaten, and then Meditate. Which meant that you got Kaiten, which took up over 100% of your Kenkai generation. Like, you didn't actually have enough Kenkai generation to actually get all of it that you wanted. And then they gave you a dash in and dash away action that cost Kenki you didn't have to spare. Traverse says, didn't the Kaiten removal come right after you did a Samurai Guide? Yes, it did. It was like, I made my level 51 to 90 Samurai Guide for Endwalker. And then like a month later, Kaiten got deleted. And that made my guide completely useless because back when you had Kaiten, rotation planning, like the Samurai rotation from the start to the end was like managing Kaiten. Now you use Kaiten, make sure to save resources for Kaiten and all this. It is actually pretty funny, Leah. I'm pretty sure that Fell Cleave hasn't been changed that much in potency. It's just that other better buttons were added. Like Inner Chaos was added, and then they went like, we have to go even further beyond. Have Primal Rend. Oh! Welcome to the next hour of stream. I don't think this will take an hour. Also, hey Cyanide, hope you're doing well. Hey Vicels, hope you're doing well as well. 1 hour later. The answer to Fell Cleave potency relevant drop isn't bigger Fell Cleaves, it's more Fell. Well, let's wait and see. Look for. I'm saying, I don't think it'll happen, but if we get a trait that boosts the potency of Fell Cleave, or we actually finally get Feller Cleave, then I said it. I'm not the only one that said it, of course. That's actually true. We already have, we actually brought Fell Cleave for this raid, as you can see. We brought an extra Fell Cleave for the warrior. See, it's the Gunbreaker. Bad Angel says, what are your thoughts on the combining combos into one button argument? I don't think it's that good, because the jobs that actually need it, or could benefit from it, are few, and might not actually need it. Like, the combined combos into one button argument is as good as why do we have to do that song and dance with the mudra signs? Can't we just have a Suiton button? That's how I feel about it. Why do we have combos that you have to choose to click correctly? Because it's a video game. But I do get that some jobs feel like it's unneeded to have the combos. Like, Dragoon could probably work with 2 or 3 buttons for, like, something that is actually, like, 10 buttons. But it's just, like, one step closer to... Oh, all rotations are single button. Like, a good argument I've heard others bring forward about it is, you know the thing with having a 1-button combo rotation, like your GC is just 1 button? Yeah, healers have that, and they don't like it. They hate it. Right? I don't know why you'd want that for your melee DPS. Like, it's not actually about... Like, some people usually use the argument that, well, it's not hard to do. Why do I have to do this? It's not hard. No, it's not a skill check. It's to make it feel like you're actually playing the game. It's not supposed to be a skill check. There's also the part that often... I feel like the people that bring forward the just stack the combos like in PvP don't realize that there's one crucial difference between combos in PvP and PvE. In PvP, most jobs don't actually really care which step they are in the combo. They're just using it as filler while they don't have access to their other buttons. Like, the exception is like Monk. Like, just Monk. Because their step 7 in PvP is like 10,000 damage. Where the rest is like 3-4-5, 3-4-5 or something like that. So Monk cares about keeping track of that. But the thing is, in PvP, Monk doesn't have that many things to keep track of. So they have the mental space to look at their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 combo, and yeah, it makes sense that it's one single button. But something like, for example, Gunbreaker, in PvP, if you don't have anything else, that's when you use the solid barrel combo, and eventually you reach the point where you're like, you get you get the powder gauge buff, so you can do 1 burst strike. But you were going to do that anyway. I'm actually pretty sure it's safer to stand here. Never mind, I used my knockback immunity. I didn't actually remember that that worked. I actually meant to land on the block down there, because then I could have stood in the middle block in case the boss did something else. I've just discovered back when I did this Alliance raid way more that it was better to land somewhere in the middle of the arena, because it gave you more options to reposition depending on whether the main boss did a middle AoE or sides. And yeah, as Viek mentioned, some of the jobs that would actually be negatively impacted by their combos being consolidated to a single button would be like Paladin and Gunbreaker might not like that. Because they both can... They can gain some value out of just doing 1-2 combos in a desperate situation. They wouldn't be able to do that anymore if you forced them to do a 1-2-3 combo. So I just get the impression that the players that say, can't we just have a single button like they do in PvP? They've seen that PvP, their PvP profile has a combo as a single button, and go, can't I just have that? And don't, like, see the bigger picture. That's my impression. I hope that that long answer answers your question, Bad Angel. Exactly, Leah. They assume everything's going right, and they're also often viewing doing your combos as a skill check, which they feel it is not, because it is not. There's also the argument, yeah, that some people say, well, when you're playing in a solo duty as an NPC, and the NPC has the PvP combo, but in most cases, those NPCs also have a vastly a significantly simplified version of the entire job. Cope says, I'm not sure how I feel about one button combos, but I think it could free up space for more interesting buttons to keep track of, or even just press. Do we need more buttons? Like, genuinely, like, that's a fair point, Cope, that to some degree I can see what you mean. Like, I can agree with you to some capacity that, sure, we could have more interesting buttons than the buttons we have now. We could have that. But I feel like a lot of jobs don't actually need more stuff. And I think Punk Fiddler, I think you're actually onto something here. The real problem might actually be that there's not any choice or interesting decision making in combos. If we had more, more branching combos, which jobs used to have more of, if we had reasons to not finish combos more, like, that there was more thought put into it. And the reason why I'm agreeing more with this than just getting more buttons, Cub, is because what is the thing they're going to add be? Another OGCD you use every 30 seconds? Another OGCD you use every minute? Because that doesn't feel that much more interesting than a combo action. If they add more defensive cooldowns, that would actually add something that where you have to think. But part of the reason why combos feel so pointless nowadays, I think, is because years ago, jobs had more options. Like, warriors used to have 2 step 2 combos, and one of those step 2 combos had 1 finisher and the other had 2. We just lost the other option. We lost the enmity combo, so now there's like less. Paladins used to have 2 different step 2 step 2 combos and 2 step 3 well, they actually used to have 3 step 3 combos as well, but they lost 2 of them. So, like, part of the reason why it feels this way is because part of the reason why we had different combos was because we had options. We had more things to choose. And they slowly disappeared. For a second there, I was very confused as to how that white mage survived that. Then I realized that they had raise immunity. Multiple combo finishers that give personal buffs or dots. Oh man, you won't believe what we used to have. That's exactly how it used to be. Like, warriors used to have their enmity finisher, and then Maim and Storm's Eye gave different effects you wanted to maintain. Depending on when you look in the timeline, it was either one of them gave a slashing resistance debuff, and the other one gave the warrior damage buff. Me neither, Cobb. That is also why I'm basically just trying to be like a little bit of a devil's advocate, right? I don't know if it would be objectively better to have PvP combos. I can just see where the problems would be because, you know, I have done a significant amount of PvP. And I know that the only reason why it would kind of work is because in PvP... why it kind of works is because in PvP, the exact step you're on your combo doesn't really matter. And then I also know that technically healers already have this reality that people are asking for when they say, can't we just have a PvP combo? This is like, basically, imagine that this is doses 1, 2, 3 and it's a 1, 2, 3 combo. This is what it would look like. This is what it would feel like. You're just spamming one button. Like, just, you know, if you like, I'm just saying, I've said this earlier as well, I'm not trying to put anyone out or single anyone out. It's just a discussion. But if you're thinking that PvP combos would be fun for like jobs with long melee combos, do some PvP, try some PvP, and see how often do you actually use your filler combo. How much do you keep track of it? And also play healer a bit. Just a bit. Just see how it feels. I think it might give some insight. I'm not saying that what we have is the best in the world. I'm just saying that having PvP combos might actually be worse. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. And that is also a good point, Bad Angel. Interestingly, Monk is one of the jobs. It's actually it's like the perfect example of a job where just putting them, where PvP combos wouldn't work. Both because, like, you could do something like, I don't know, like, you could make it so that you have 3 buttons instead of 9. But how are you going to do your Masterful Blitz? Exactly, Hugo. Precisely. Not only is Monk the perfect PvE example of a job where PvP combo stacks wouldn't really work very well, but Monk is also the only good example of a PvP job where you're focusing on the filler button. I know in PvP and MMOs how many buttons are usually available for most jobs. Around 1 hotbar. Approximately 1 hotbar. Sometimes less, sometimes a bit more. But usually 1 hotbar. And Monk has extremely little because 7 of their attacks is just this. Just this. Just 1 button. Just mashing 1. Thank you, Bad Angel. That's true, Cop. I should also say that when I say try and play a healer for a bit, I'm not saying, oh look, it's not that hard, is it? It's more that the attack rotation of a healer is essentially what is the ultimate conclusion of let's stack our combos in a single button. Because that's what it would be, is it's a single button. And healers already have that, and healers have asked to not have that, at least since Endwalker's beginning, approximately, if not since Shadowbringers. Which is where they lost their additional buttons. Scholars used to have multiple dots to maintain, White Mages used to have multiple dots to maintain. Is the GCD in PvP sped up? On some jobs. Most jobs have a GCD of 2.4 in PvP. Monk has a GCD of 2, and they can get a speed boost on top of that. From I believe from Thunderclap. I believe it's called Riddle of Wind. But it's like a thing they maintain. So I think they have like a GCD of 1.8 or something like that normally. But the thing is, monks just mash 1. Like, that's what they do. And then they use OGCDs in between in PvP. I don't think they have other GCDs. I'm pretty sure it's just that. Maybe Enlightenment is a GCD, actually. Hey, Coco. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, exactly, Band Angel. Just mash 1. And then, like, because the monks... The way monk works in PvP... I'm pretty sure 6-sided star is an OGCD. I'm pretty sure that's the OGCD because it is the stun. We can check it after this. Can you stop a moment to comment on how we need another 2 Aetherites at least in the Sea of Clouds? I feel like there are other zones that need an Aetherite before that, Vicels. Like, for example, the zone outside Idleshire, which has a grand total of 0. Azizla could also use an extra 1. Garlemald could actually use an extra 1. I mean, I'm not saying that you're not right. I'm just saying that if we had the option, there are other ones I'd rather give it to. But yeah, basically what I'm getting at with monk PvP is that the reason why monks filler matters is because their entire PvP rotation is actually, like, that's the point of it. Like, that's how it works. It's like how Red Mage, the way Red Mage works in PvP is primarily by using their melee combo. It just has a cooldown. But you can't, a trick you can do is cast a spell so that you can use, so that you have dual cast, which is not spent by your melee combo, by the way. So, it has, 2 main mechanics. And it has, the color shift. And that's the thing with PvP, is that the jobs are somewhat simplified, but they're just concentrated on 1 or 2 core things that they do. Instead of, more than that. Hey, Ymir. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back, more precisely. Alliance B is not doing super well. Let's not neglect our own tank. Are you winning? I think so. Ah. I hoped I could protect you, Lexi. Wasn't enough. I chose randomly. Jacob said I work down to up. Alright. I'll work up to down then. Yeah, the trick I use to not get hit by the red girls when they're spinning is that I move to where they were looking, approximately. Like, either where they were looking, or I switched to behind where they were, like the opposite of where they were looking. So like keep standing like kind of behind them. I know that sounds like relatively obvious when you think about it, but it isn't that easy. Anyone leave? I think there was one that left in Alliance A right at the start. I can't believe they based a whole game off this raid. Oh, how do we have resources to spare to help Alliance B? Any free spots? I mean, we were 8 when we got in, but let's see what we're doing after this. If anything, we spent quite a lot of time on bonus tea time today. That is an interesting point, Punk Fiddler. You could make it more interesting by adding more things to react to on your one-button combo. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. This fight is so ridiculous. There's so much damage in this particular fight. Just, oh yeah, this is casual content, by the way, everyone. Anyone rage quit after Alliance B got wiped? No, they stayed. I think this is fine. Oh boy, so much damage. It's only been almost 30 minutes, Vicels. Oh, this is where it becomes really hard, because I can't keep track of 2 of them at once. Which way do you spin? That way? Okay. There is a safe spot. I see it, Felcleave. I just don't want to risk it. Even for Biscuit? I don't know if I'd do it for Biscuit. In this particular group, I don't think I would. I feel like there's a lot of people dying. So if I die, I feel like there's the ship might crumble. think we need more than that. Careful what you wish for. Did you wish for this? Fellcleave says, who's harder, launch TG Sid or launch Red Girl? Personally, I feel like Red Girl wasn't this hard when it was new. So I'm reasonably confident in saying it was probably TG Sid without actually seeing TG Sid on release. I wish for not level 50. Yeah, well, you did actually say, but preferably 90, right? Coco's ready. Undead Insanity says, I'm interested in learning Sage, and I'm at the beginning of Shadowbringers. Would it be a bad idea to start Sage and Shadowbringers? I do have Scholar at 70 and Astronaut at 75, so I'm a bit familiar with healing and ready. If you're well acquainted with Scholar at 70, then a large part of the Sage toolkit at 70 is just copy paste of Scholar toolkit. So I think you're good on that Insanity. Just be aware that the first dungeon you're going to meet in Shadowbringers, Holminster Switch, is known to be really, really mean. So just keep that in mind. If you feel confident in your ability as Scholar, then like try to reapply that knowledge for Sage and you should be pretty good. Like there are differences, but there's not many differences. At least not at level 70. If you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the toolkit despite that, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to start with a lower level dungeon where there's less of the toolkit to learn. But if you already have Scholar, as I said, if you already have Scholar leveled to 70, then you're already good. Like you have done like I would generally recommend, like if you want to play Sage and you don't have access to level 70 job there yet, then like it would be optimal to like level up with a healer, especially Scholar, because it's the most similar. So you've already done the homework that I would have given you. For a second I thought it was just completely done. Well, I didn't kill you with my 2 universal assaults. Guess I'll just you're giving homework? I'm giving optional homework. Good luck on that Insanity. And if you do need more, then remember I do have a starter guide for Sage. Flaming Jockey says, the last boss of Holminster Switch always gets me because I struggle with left and right attacks for some reason. Oh yeah, because it does the left knout and right knout. Yeah. My best advice there is if you stand really close to the boss, you can just position yourself when it comes. That's the best suggestion I have. Nice one, Catch. Just to be sure, because there's multiple tricks for the first room in Aurum Vale, what was the trick you used? Also, hey Matsuro, hope you're doing well. How do you know which way to move with the half-room cleave here? Oh, the circle? It rotates in the direction it's going to roll in. Ah, right. Nice one, Catch. No, it's fine, Traverse. It's the kind of thing where if you're not looking at it, you'll never notice. See? Spinning right. And the second one always spins left if the first one spins right. Gogo says, my favorite Aurum strat is I go left and Kai goes right. That is a way to pull everything, certainly. I just want to highlight how much more relaxing this fight already is compared to Red Girl. I didn't go right. I'm pretty sure I didn't. Yeah, I did pull extra by accident. That is true. Bad Angel says, do you have a set schedule? Or do you decide before and post a weekly schedule? I do have a sort of set schedule in that we usually do Dailies Hangout streams or something like that on Tuesdays around this time. Well, around the time where we started. And I usually release a video Wednesday and Friday at the same starting time. And we also do usually either tea time or solo challenge stream on Thursdays, which start at the same time. And on Saturdays we do small Kai side quest, which starts at the same time, which is 5 GMT, well 17 GMT plus 2 or 5 PM GMT plus 2. And it's of course it's because it's 5 PM where I am that we start. Spike says, love how raids make you feel like a toy on a D&D tabletop. Yeah, Bad Angel, I don't know if you are in the community Discord, but that is... I can't remember if you joined. I would assume maybe you are. But there you can also see, like, whenever... Like, you can actually scroll back up and see that the schedule has been pretty consistent for months. If not almost years at this point. I also post the weekly schedule as a community post once a week, but that one is a little harder to find on the YouTube channel because you have to scroll back in time for that. Also, hey Ham, hope you're doing well. I'm over here weaving Discord community link posts. The lack of music? There is music though. It's just quieter. Can't hear any. You. It might be because I'm very loud by comparison, but there is music. But yeah, I do like for the weekly schedule. I do post it as a community post on the YouTube channel every week. It usually comes shortly after on the YouTube, and it usually comes shortly after it has been posted on the Discord server. After that, I post it on the X channel, and there it's actually pinned, so you can find it there as well if you really don't want to be in the Discord server. But yeah, on that note, the schedule is rather consistent. So once you're acquainted with when we start, streams and videos are posted, then you can probably memorize it from your own schedule, Bad Angel. Because I've intentionally tried my best to make sure that we start around the same time every time we start anything. That's why videos are released at the same time as I start streams. Just on different days, so that you don't have to choose. Jacob, the hero of the whole alliance, racing across teams. I didn't even see that orb. I didn't get to see where the one float going at us actually got placed. Double kill. Oh boy. I should have looked further ahead. Oh, right, the building. Yes, indubitably, the building. Just a boss actually throwing a building at you is one of the funniest things ever. And it'll never not be funny. I remember the first time I did this raid, I did it like with a group of friends. And one of the funniest parts was specifically that I saw someone just get like yeeted across the sky by the building. 1 hour later. Well, this took 45 minutes, I'm pretty sure. No, wait, 50... No. Yeah, 45, right? Yeah, 44 minutes, actually. Zav says, I've never done LB3 plus LB1 on that, but I don't think I've seen that before either. But I think it has... I can't remember if I've ever had an alliance in Tower at Paradigm's Breach that, like, on average had, like, 2 players dead from start to finish. Like, we had an insane amount of deaths. Rontom says your stream starts about an hour into work, so it's great background noise when I work. Nice! I actually have heard a lot of specifically American players that are like, well, you start the stream when I go to work. And I feel like that's a decent, like, middle ground is that I stream around the time when a lot of EU people are home. And that made sense because, well, originally I could only play with EU players anyway. And then, of course, it's still late enough, or still early enough that NA players can at least participate. That, of course, means that OCE and JP players are a bit out of luck. In that we usually start, like, around bedtime, I feel like, for OCE. Himia says you should play Near Replicant. I have a friend who a long time ago, like, the original reason I managed to convince him to give Final Fantasy XIV a try was because of the Neo raids existing. He gave up and burned out just as he reached Heavensward. Like, we're talking, he got the quest to go to Ishgard and then he was done. In contrast, I have seen Nier. It looks interesting. Incidentally, there's a character in the game that is named the same as me. But I don't know if it's the kind of game that I would find fun. And that's not anything bad about the Nier games. They look incredible, and there's a lot in it. But I just don't think that it's the game that I would enjoy. Real name is Vice. It's not. I'm just waiting on the old Dansk stream. Don't get to speak it here in the States, and every now and then I'll hear a statement that I know is an expression and be like, oh, I got that. Oh, nice. Are you... Wait, Bronson, are you also from Denmark? Punk Fiddler says from Asia. Here it's 2:30 a.m. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that matches pretty well with how we started around normal bedtime almost from over there. Norway. Ah, I see. I don't think I'll ever do an all Danish stream because I feel like a lot of people would be like, what? I don't really get this one. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's the thing. Like, I had someone suggested a while back when I made the You Pull It, You Tank It video. There was someone who said, please do a stream where you exclusively use the Tank God Complex voice. And also, like, do it in character. And, I believe the Tank God Complex voice was something like this. And And on the one hand, it would be funny to just be a jerk for 3 hours. But then on the other hand, I feel like that's fun for like 5 minutes, really, right? And thank you for joining, Lexi. Exactly, Catch. Precisely, it's that. It would be funny for a moment. But then again, like, that's actually a good example. Yesterday, we did a stream where I literally just walked around for nearly 5 hours, right? If I had just done that and was just like only focused on the walk, like, no, let's not talk about anything else, we're walking here, that would be funny for maybe 1 hour. But we were talking about so many other things and just be like doing whatever, which made it like more interesting. But if I had just made it about walking the entire time, it would get old way too fast. So like, that's why I'm like, I have thought about, well, I could say Danish phrases sometimes if it was funny, but there would be no benefit to like having an entire stream like that. No more shall Kai have jobs to bear him to duty fighter. Henceforth he shall walk. And I'm actually very glad that a lot of people enjoyed the walk stream. Like, there's nothing preventing us from like just doing walk streams instead of tea time. Like, we could stand somewhere and have tea time. We could also make walk streams. Like, it would be close to similar. The problem is that we can't do, like, clip review on a walk stream. Or we'd have to stop somewhere to, like, do clip review. It would be fun to see you explain why Jobs prefer crit while pretending to have a god complex. Nah, everyone just get crit. It gives more damage. What's the point? The healer doesn't even need to be here. I don't even know what they're healing me. I'm a warrior. Smash cut to the healer who's literally using Aflatus Solace to access Aflatus Misery, and we're not in the middle of a poll. It says you barely review any clips. I reviewed 4 clips last time. I'm trying. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, is that I don't know if people would rather have more clips or have more talk. Ham says, walk to a place, have a sit down and review a clip. That's actually a good idea. Just like for tea time, just go, we walk to this place and we talk about whatever while we walk. And then when we reach the destination, we do clip review. That would actually be a way to make sure that we get to clip review. But it would also mean that clip review would always be put in like the back end. Not that that doesn't normally happen, it seems to. But that would be a way to control that. It would. And that could be a thing. We don't have a tea time stream this week, so I have until next week to figure that out if we do that. It says you just get easily sidetracked. I do. I actually, when I finished the stream yesterday, I thought to myself, how many questions did I get asked where I started on a thought, reached some point in the thought and started getting like digging deep on something specific and then never returned to the original thought. Like there was a point where I can't remember if it was Bad Angel. There was someone that asked like, what would you like to see for the new jobs, the rework jobs? And I went on my typical spiel about, well, I want what people would like, what the people that play, and like for the rework jobs, I want what the people that are actually playing them would want. Like that's where I draw the line. But, and then I suggested like 2 or 3 things for Dragoon, and then I saw another interesting question. It was like, so what about Vibrant Pictomancer and Astrologian? What would you like for them? Not important. We already talked about Dragoon, remember? Yeah, so like that's like the classic is that someone asks a question, if the answer's too long, there's a chance that I'll like forget what the original question is and just like go on this mega tangent on something else, and then when I finished it, I'll check the chat and be like, oh, there's this other question. I would find it quite funny if one day someone was like, so you didn't finish 10 things throughout this stream, but I mean, it's not that I'm not finishing answering the questions because I don't want to, it's just there's a lot of questions and only so much time. And then I forget. And you're welcome, Catch. That is a good idea. I do feel like just standing around at the house can get a little bit stale in a way. And now that we're like doing it on OCE, there isn't even a house to stand at. So last time we just stood in the middle of nowhere. So if we just took walks. If we just took walks, that would add something to look at, something to talk about sometimes, I guess. It would, however, make it slightly more awkward if we want to demonstrate something. Some people also, I remember yesterday there were some people that weren't sure if it was okay to ask about something unrelated because we're on a walk. The house is very nice for job demonstrations, but if we are on OCE anyway, then I wouldn't have this house. So then we would have to like go to someone's house on OCE, or just hang out at like Summerford Farms or something like. Oh, there's striking dummies here. I actually do remember when I was doing the tea time in OCE the first time, I almost decided to hang out at Bent Branch because there's striking dummies nearby. I can't remember what made me decide against that, but it would be very good for job demonstrations to have striking dummies. Although, I mean, depending on how complex the thing you want to demonstrate is, you could just stop the walk and attack something. Oh, there's a mob right here. Blap. Unless Bob has already shot it. Yeah, Coco, another walk. We could do many walks. It didn't have to be the only one. Although it was an idea that sprouted from a joke. Technically, it sprouted from a joke. That is actually the incredible thing about April 1st. Is that it's an extremely convenient opportunity to like test something to see if people would like it. Because if people don't like it, well, it was just a joke. If people do like it, then you totally meant it. Although the walk was actually a case of we talked about it. I believe it was Vince that came with a lot of input on it as well. We talked about in a thread on the Discord server about what the longest distance was. And then I thought about what would be a good way to actually use that information. And a video on it would still kind of require, you know, background footage of something, you know, like a walk. And the thing is, that would be incredibly... It would be dreadfully boring to record that alone. So that's why it became a stream. Ransom says, I like how the walk is just tea time with purpose. That's what it kind of became, right? I wasn't, like, the thing is, I wasn't sure if anyone would actually tune in to watch. Like, I had a feeling that once they realized that it was actually serious, that I was going to walk, there wouldn't be very many sticking around. Zip says, I mean, I technically have a community area in my upstairs house that people are always welcome to AFK in. I mean, yeah. But you're also always welcome to hang out at my house. It wasn't to say that we couldn't hang out at my house. I just can't bring my house to OCE. Hey, Kokochu. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, indeed, Vince. Interestingly, when we did the walk, so I only very accurately timed the walk from Gangos to Mare Lamentorum. We didn't nearly as accurately time the walk from Mare Lamentorum to Ultima Thule, and I think actually we did it wrong in Ultima Thule. If we had done the walk correctly, then we should have taken the teleport to the Omicron tribe area, and then the teleport up to the coffee shop, which could have saved us like 5 or 10 minutes. And then we should have walked the last bit up to the grass, to the flower area. And if we had saved like 10 minutes, then it's also worth mentioning that we wasted at least 20 minutes looking for a path, a walkable path, out of Mare Lamentorum. Again, if we had followed the rules of the walk itself, we should have taken the doggo because it's there and available. Like, it's the same as taking a boat or an airship because it's there. It's the shortest path and it's allowed, so you use it. So we could have saved possibly like 30 minutes. And I believe someone timed the walk from Mare Lamentorum to Ultima Thule at, I think they said 2 hours and 20 minutes. And the walk from, and that's of course including the wasted time, so it would have been like 1 hour and 50 minutes if we could have saved half an hour. From Gangos to Mare Lamentorum was 1 hour and 41 minutes. So it was like really close, despite the Gangos trip having like 1 or 2 extra zones on the list. Hey Ryan, hope you're doing well. But yeah, then like if we start doing regular walk streams like that, then we could test far more of these. Like, for example, yesterday we had the conversation of what was it? Idleshire, like just the distance from Idleshire to Ishgard. Originally, I was like, well, you just go to Kurtha's Western Highland, and there you go. But then there was the counterpoint of, yes, but can you walk there? I don't know. And if you can't walk there, then you add an entire zone to that. And then there was also someone that mentioned that, well, I mean, maybe, like, the furthest up in Churning Mists you can get on foot, I think is like something like here? Maybe that? I think it's this way around. All the way down to here, to like go back this way, might be longer than, you know, starting up here, going all the way through here, all the way through here. And then, like, where these two paths would meet would be somewhere right around here. So Churning Mists might actually be further away from Ishgard than Idleshire. And then we would go from there. So, like, basically my point is that we have a lot of different paths we could test if we're walking anyway. So we could do that. I think it could be fun. Walking time streams with questions. Alright, Emir, good night. But on the one hand, with today's stream, on the one hand, we basically didn't do P12 or Thalea, and we ended later than the normal ending time. But we got more time to talk about stuff. So I feel like that's a net win in my book. I feel like that's a net win. Yeah, indeed, Vince. The entire, like, area up there is like what we discovered in Mare Lamentorum was that, and also Labyrinthos, is that there are places where it looks like you can go through, but you can't. So it's very possible that even though this looks walkable, maybe the game just says, no, there's an invisible wall here for some reason. So that's why I'm like thinking maybe it's this way down. It could be this way down even. You have to go through here maybe. It could be really long. I would probably have to scout that before we go. To have an idea. With that said, if you enjoyed the company of the wonderful people you met in the chat, or me, remember that there's a Discord community server that you can join, where you will find most of them, I think. You also find the weekly schedule, easy to access, where you can see what else is coming up on the channel in the coming days. You will also find the announcement room, where you will see a link to new videos or streams when they come out. And if you go to the role assignments room, you can grab the reminder role, and if you do, you get a notification whenever there is a new video or a stream. You get an extra notification around 15 minutes before stream starts, so you don't miss a second. If you did enjoy this particular stream, it helps me a lot if you leave a like on it in the YouTube system, because that tells the YouTube algorithm that, oh, this was a very enjoyable stream, and you would like other people to watch it as well. So naturally, that helps me a lot. So thank you so much in advance. And if you would like to support the channel even more directly, you can also, you can buy a membership, you can gift memberships, you can use the super chat system, or if you don't want to use the YouTube stuff, you can also, there's a Ko-Fi link in the description. All of it, of course, helps me and the channel to thrive, but it is all optional. I don't want anyone to feel obligated to give anything. All the content on the channel is, of course, free to see for everyone. But thank you so much for all the support, whether it's watching the streams or memberships or whatever it is. It helps me a lot. Yeah, I think that's I guess that's what we ended up doing. I did say at the start of the stream, we'll do the roulettes we normally do, and then I'll figure out what we'll do after that. And I guess what we decided to do was just do a lot of tea time. With that said, tomorrow I have a video coming out about terrible rotations in Final Fantasy XIV, particularly absurd alternate rotations. You can already see a sneak peek in the little thumbnail in the weekly schedule of one of them. Not all of them are terrible, but it is an opportunity to talk about some weird rotations that are wrong. With that, good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye-bye!